Ouch. Hey guys, I'm not sure if you're going to have a problem with Lisa. I don't know if Lisa knows you've got to, as far as I know, you've got to log in through StreamYard. See, she's there. So let me add her. Add to stream. Hi Lisa, can you hear me?
I can.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
No, I'm good. Long time no see, although we've spoken a little bit.
Yeah. We haven't done this in a very long time.
Yeah, it has been a while. So you're in LA, right?
Yes.
And you've also got a dog.
I do. Miss Scarlett. She's like,
is she around?
She is. She's like right next to me, wanting to come up. Should I go get her?
Maybe a little bit later.
Okay.
Okay.
You will no doubt hear her at some point.
Yeah. Have you got earbuds in?
I do. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, okay. Yeah. You sound fine. Do I sound okay? No echoes or anything?
No echo.
Okay. You're looking good.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. This is what retired life does to you.
Yeah.
Retirement from crime, I should say.
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, so I just want to quickly greet a few of you. Some of the members are here: SM Kovalinsky, Susan, Terry, Robbie, Robin, Nonya, and so on. A couple of you have already sort of said, is this clickbait or is it a joke? It's just taking things too far. We are going to talk about this case that's apparently happening in July. I'll take you through a little bit of the basics of the case, the facts of the case, and then also the early sort of rebuttal. So the counter arguments that are already sort of being suggested that actually they were hugging each other or something. So the format of this, Timmy, I'm going to put you down. The format of this show is basically in 4 parts. So the first one we'll deal with GREGG Rocky Brooks versus Johnny C. Depp, that case, and the sort of rebuttal. The second one, the second part of the 4, we're going to look at this juror that has apparently come out specifically, but then also in a general sense. So it doesn't really matter if he's the genuine article or not. We're still going to talk about the jurors in a general way. Lisa's been a jury, is it 3 times?
Twice.
Twice. Okay, so Lisa's done jury duty twice, and Lisa's going to share a little bit of her experience and also her recommendations for sequestering and what to do going forward to protect juries and that sort of thing. And then just, own experience. And then the third aspect, which is a little bit where angels fear to tread, what impact does Asian culture have on this jury? And I think Lisa might also be able to talk about that in a general sense, is if you're in a jury and, if you're a woman and they're men, if you're of this particular race and the other people, does it become a factor? Is it not a factor at all? That kind of thing. The juror that has sort of apparently identified himself is an Asian man who said that he felt very uncomfortable with Amber looking at him. So is that something that anyone would have felt, everyone would have felt? We're just going to look at that. And then the fourth area, which is really the area both of us really want to talk about. So it's really the main focus of this episode, is the cultural dystopia. What is actually happening? I really want Lisa to talk a lot about that. What is happening to the American landscape? What is happening to this whole, has justice become a fairy tale? Has the idea of justice become, totally unrealistic, right? And Lisa's kind of got quite strong feelings about that, so we definitely talk about that. If there's time, I'm going to dip into Ernest Becker. I've got quite a few things highlighted in quite a few books here. That's 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I don't know if there'll be time, but if there is, this might be quite a meaningful and powerful episode, especially for those who know me and know my channel. Before we get started, I want to do 2 things. The one is I want to just talk a little bit about Lisa. Lisa, how do we know each other?
Oh God. We've known each other for many years now. We met during the Oscar Pistorius trial. I was covering it on my Juror 13 blog, and you were covering it in Africa, and we were connected by a mutual person following both of our accounts, suggested we connect to talk about the case, and we did. And then, within weeks or a month of that, we were working together. So that was back in 2014.
Do you remember both of us sitting in court in South Africa? Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm. Of course, yeah.
I remember a journalist was sitting next to us and asked, I think, who you were and what's going on, and you were like, well, I'm writing a book on Oscar, and she said, can you even make money out of that? Remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. Yeah. And for me, I mean, that, and to this day, I mean, that's never been my focus or my interest, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. We've talked about this many times. It's okay to have a career based on this, but for me, that was never my motivation. So
okay, so, and then we went on to co-write, so we wrote a couple of Oscar books together. Mm-hmm. And then we co-wrote a couple of Jodi Arias books. I think there were 6 in the series, 5 or 6 in the series.
Yeah,
that was quite.
I'm laughing when you say couple, because
yeah.
We never keep it to a couple.
Yeah, it was quite interesting how that was my introduction to true crime in America, was the Jodi Arias case. It was like, mm-hmm. And I mean, she was 32 days on the stand, wasn't it? Well, no, 18 days on the stand.
Yeah, it was a long time. Yeah. And it's kind of unheard of, obviously, for people to take the stand, especially in her scenario. But yeah, I mean, that was an unusual case too, because the jurors were allowed to ask questions, and it's something that has kind of come up recently in these conversations about how do we ensure the jurors are not, tainted or not, completely so biased that they can actually judge these cases fairly. That's one of the things that's come up in some of the reading that I have done about, maybe we give the jurors more ability to be interactive during the trial. So yeah, I mean, that just happens to be part of their system in Arizona, where the jurors can ask questions of the defendant on stand. And they got some interesting information from that. So I actually liked that.
That's a really interesting point. I mean, just on a purely practical level, at the end of a court day, do you guys have any questions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And also let the gallery out. Do you have any questions? Do you have any comments about today? It's a whole day. Did something happen that you've got a question about? So the whole idea that they're going to bottle everything up for 6 weeks and then suddenly let the genie out and it's going to be this perfect thing, it's just, to me, a little bit unrealistic.
It is. It's hard. And especially for cases that go on for several weeks, and, like Johnny and Amber's went on for 6 weeks. There's a lot of information that's taken place during that time that you can't discuss with anybody, and things do get lost. So I don't really know if that's the best way to handle that.
That's also a good point, is when you say you can't discuss it with anyone, mm-hmm. Well, why can't you discuss it with the judge? Why can't you discuss mm-hmm. it with someone in the court setting? Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So do you have to bottle it up and be like, I don't know what is going on and I'm not quite sure. It's like something that I've found as someone who sat in on a couple of trials is like so often, sometimes even a really educated guy like a judge, or even a lawyer that's sitting in, may not know what a certain word means. They may not know, they may have misheard even. There may be just a misunderstanding. And I often find in the mass of information, sometimes simple, practical things are just forgotten about, such as, can you hear what the person's saying? You know, like, is the audio quality right? So, like, to me, what's just baffling is in the you know, the time that we are now, it's like, so can we not just make sure of the details? Just like the sound quality is fine, but also things like, you know, I've got a question, can I ask the question, kind of thing. It's just like, well, can we not think about this in a practical way, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, you know how many questions, like when the case was going on, you see chat, and the chat's like this hamster wheel running like this, and people are like asking all these questions. Well, you can imagine that the jury have some of those questions are similar as well. You know, what does this mean? Does this change everything? All that kind of thing. So I don't know.
Yeah.
So we're going to get to that in a moment. I do want to come back to the other thing, but we spoke earlier about having professional juries. It's juries that are. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So there's, you know, I'll say I'm not in a position where I feel like I know what the solution is. And I mean, there's a lot of different things that are kind of being thrown out right now, but I do know that something has to change. I don't think that we can stay the system that we are completely without some evolution of it at some point, because like you were talking about yesterday, we're never going to go back from where we are at this point in time with social media and the barrage of information. Everything that we do on a daily basis in our work, in our personal lives, we are bombarded by messaging that is geared towards us and towards our emotions and our actions. So this exists in our world, and we have to acknowledge that within our courtrooms. So, you know, so what do? I mean, do you get rid of juries and just have a judge decide? You know, some countries do that, some states do that, depending on, you know, what the situation is with the case. The other thought is having professional juries, and there's elements of that I actually really like. There was a comment that you kind of thrown out to me earlier today about, can we keep the system as it is, but can we, with the jurors that come in and are seated, can we give them some additional training beyond just saying at the end of the case, okay, here's your instructions, here's what you're going to go do? Can we go beyond that? Can we give them some more education for a few hours, do some testing? Maybe that's part of the voir dire process, that they go through some testing. But I just honestly, I don't think that's feasible. I don't think that the way that we're set up, that we have the resources or the time to do that. I don't think people have the tolerance for that. I think it's really, you know, as it is, most people don't want to serve jury duty. And I think that, like, those things are just going to be an extra turnoff and a real burden on the system to have to figure out. So then, you know, so then that begs the question, well, do we have professional jurors where, you know, you bring people in that's their job, they're paid. And when you're paid to do something, you're more invested, you're more trained, you know, you're more a part of the process. So I like that idea. I think that there are definitely benefits to that. But here's the downfall is that once you're paid by the court to do this job, you know, whether you're elected or hired or however that process is going to take place, now you're a part of the system. And what is this massive problem in America right now? Mistrust of the system. For good reason. You know, I mean, there is a lot of reason to mistrust it. And then unfortunately that, you know, that festers, and that there's also reasons to trust it. But once a jury becomes part of the government system, do we really believe that those jurors are going to have that are going to be there without political strings, without pressures to, like, you know, to decide cases a certain way? That is actually the whole purpose of a jury system. It's a checks and balance between the government and the person who's on the stand. And we love that about our country. I love that about our country, if, you know, as it works. But when it doesn't work, then, you know, I don't know. So I'm a little bit stuck. I don't really know a solution, to be honest with you.
I think a primary question to ask is, how do you take bias out of the system? And I don't know whether you can. I think we've become very biased people. How many people do you know that is completely neutral? You know,
you can't take bias out of a human.
Yeah.
It's a human system. You can't.
So I think people have got to kind of just start. That's kind of a starting point, and acknowledge that that is maybe even a bridge too far. And so it sounds like science fiction, but maybe you need machine intelligence that really doesn't have a foot in the race. It's programmed to make kind of a cool calculation, right? I suppose one could also say machines don't have intuition. They don't know what human dynamics really are, whatever. But if you look at how the algorithm is so intuitive, that's the other side of the story. Anyway, we're going to cycle back to this. There's a solution, I think, and a problem, I think, that comes closer to addressing this. But as a way of introducing the overall topic of this particular live stream, I mean, basically, the title of today is A Culture's Wrath. And so, is that finished? The culture's wrath, is that like it started, it ran for 6 weeks and it's done? I don't think it's finished. I think it's the shitstorm has just begun. The hurricane has still got to kind of complete its cycle, and make no mistake, there's going to be all sorts of backlashes, front lashes and backlashes, and there are people who simply don't even believe that this other case is happening because it's like, oh, it's fake news. I'm just going to put a link in chat. This is from an article dated 21st of August, 2018, right? So that's there, if you don't believe that it's happening. And then this is from 1 day ago. So if you think that I'm making it up or it's clickbait or something, and we're going to go into the merits of it in a moment. But before we do, something that Lisa and I have been navigating for a long time when we work together, and just in terms of ourselves as individual investigators, it's a very simple question in true crime, and it's a question you guys have got to ask yourselves as well. Are you able to tell who someone is simply by looking at them? Can you look at someone and go, you know what, I've got a pretty good idea who you are, right? That's the first thing. Also, are you able to tell who someone is simply by listening to them? And how good are you at that? And then also the next question is kind of, whatever your answer is to how good are you, the next one is, how much time are you willing to spend actually listening and actually looking and actually absorbing? How much time are you able to actually pay attention? So it's kind of how good are your attention skills, and also how long can you concentrate? Because I think, Lisa, you know, court cases are very much about stamina. Who can pay attention for the longest, who catches those little details, you know. And, you know, it's not just the original trial, it's the appeal, it's all the little things that add up to it. It takes stamina, it takes resources, it takes money, it takes concentration, all those things. Also, it takes resilience from the person who's kind of on the stand. The other thing that I've definitely felt as a true crime writer is, can you see beyond your own projection and transference? Can you, first of all, acknowledge what you're projecting and transferring, and can you see beyond that? So you've got to be able to say, well, I do actually have this bias. You've got to be able to see it and know it, and then also say, can I see beyond that? Some people can't. Some people won't. Can you try and give yourself the opportunity? And how good are you when you do that? So that's the second step. And then with all of that going on, are you still aware of what's going on? So if you're paying attention to a trial, you're paying attention to a particular, this is in terms of investigative thing, are you still aware of what's going on beyond this laser focus? In other words, can you pay attention in a focused way, and can you pay attention in a peripheral way? Can you do that at the same time? And not everyone can. Some people can be a Sherlock Holmes for 5 minutes. Like, just to put us into context here, what has happened while this trial has taken place? Well, we've reached a 100-day milestone in the war in Europe. A lot has been going on in that. And Ukraine has, in a way, started losing ground. Europe has been getting a bit iffy about whether they want to continue with sanctions, right? There have been 20 mass shootings in 9 days since Uvalde in Texas. That's more than an average of 2 a day. And then there's also Caitlin Armstrong, who's been on the run, and she's still on the run. And, people are kind of saying she was such a nice person. And so, are nice people capable of doing terrible things? Chris Watts is also seen as this nice person. Are nice people capable of doing terrible things? Well, apparently Caitlin Armstrong could be one of those. Chris Watts was one of those. And so it comes back to, are you able to tell who someone is simply by looking at them? So when you look at Johnny Depp in a movie, do you think that you know who he is? When you look at Johnny Depp on trial, do you think you know who he is? And the same kind of applies almost to anybody. How good are you at that? And that was, interestingly, a question that came up by both counsels. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just seen the real Johnny Depp, but from both sides. And both sides were kind of implying something else, right? Right? Do you remember that? Okay, so we're going to go into this case that's coming back to court in LA, in Lisa's neck of the woods. Lisa says, I'm not going there. I'm not covering this. If Johnny Depp comes around the corner, I'm running the other way. No.
Pretty much. I did. No, honestly, I said, as we've talked about this the last couple of days, and honestly, the reason why I'm like here right now talking about this, it really absolutely has nothing to do with him or Amber. I think I'm just in a state of like so sickened and terrified of like what is going on in America and where we're headed, that it's too important not to talk about. It's like everything else surrounding the case and not the actual case itself. So I don't know. I feel like if I go to that trial, I'm gonna like fall into like a black hole. And I want to part of that.
I think you were quite interested in covering Durst, right?
Yeah, that was different.
Yeah. And then he died.
He died after he was convicted. So yeah.
He timed it quite well. Like, I'll face justice, but on my way out. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Bruce T says perfect justice is unattainable. The process can be improved, but shouldn't become elitist. Jurors need to help with the law, not to shape their opinions and instincts. I actually said something like that to Lisa, that the reality is justice, there's never justice. So if somebody is murdered, perfect justice would be bringing that person back. If someone is mistreated or defamed, perfect justice would be to completely wipe that out. That's not the case. The justice is kind of a really good band-aid or a not very good band-aid. Justice isn't this thing where you can kind of erase something or get revenge or whatever. It's kind of like, at best, provides a little bit of closure, and even then it often opens up wounds. So when you think you're getting closure, it's actually opening up wounds. So the idea of justice and the reality of justice are often really, really different. It's almost this cliche you get with the cowboys, like Clint Eastwood in Unforgiven, when he says, "Have you ever killed a man? You're going to take away everything he has and everything he's ever had." And then that weighs in your conscience, even if it's adjusting. Like Lisa, you know, when you talk about being a juror, and you've actually got to you on a case that you're going to send someone to jail for the rest of their life, it tends to actually weigh on you. You almost feel like you're taking someone's life away, and you're an innocent person, yeah, but you are weighed down with this decision. And Lisa's often shared this with me, and you realize, wow, it is actually a huge deal. You've got someone's life in your hands, and you're an innocent person. And what do you do with that, you know?
Yeah. Well, and it's not just their life, it's the lives of their family too. You know, you sit there in a courtroom and you see these families, each side praying for a certain outcome, you know, and ultimately you're the one who's responsible for that. I mean, you can convince yourself that you're not responsible for it. The person who, you know, caused this crime or didn't cause the crime is responsible for it. But it's definitely a heavy burden. And it, you know, that is something to be considered with juries, is that, you know, sometimes they do make decisions based on what they can live with, and not actually what's right, but what they can live the rest of their life with. So I would be curious, and, you know, I'd like, if you can, throw up a poll from the people in the chat of who would rather have a system where we're judged by judges or by juries. I'd be curious to know where people stand on that. Yeah.
Let's see what they say. That's quite a good question. Do you want a court system adjudicated by judges? I spelled that J-U-G-E-S. Judges or jurors? Okay. So let's see what you guys say. It's quite a tough one, because, you know, you ultimately, now everything is on one person, and so all you can kind of really hope for is this judge fair? Is this judge, like, not a nice guy, but is he reasonable, kind of thing? You know, now it all comes down to one freaking human being, you know. So,
and that's
anyway,
why most people don't want that. And they also, too, if you're guilty, if you have something to hide, you don't want somebody who's educated making that decision, you know.
When you came to South Africa, I think you saw that you kind of have just a judge just decides, that's it. Although they do have two kind of advisors or assistants, but essentially you just have really one judge. And I think the reason for it, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure, but I think the reason for it was in South Africa, because of the complex history in this country, because of the quite idiosyncratic racial composition, you can get into all sorts of trouble with a jury system. You know, so if it's a particular case regarding a person of a particular race, it's like, well, what do you do with that? And so that you do want to have someone who's pretty well educated, someone who's brought up in the legal system, someone who can be trusted with all of those sort of complex dynamics, and who also have a record of verdicts and whatever. And, you know, even in Oscar Pistorius' case, there was this feeling of we need a judge that's going to do the country proud. And then the question is, did she? Right? The question is, what actually happened at the end of all of that? Anyway, we had almost about half an hour. I want to kick off with the first aspect of these four that you want to go through, which is the subject of this video. Johnny Depp is going to be back in court in Los Angeles in July, so next month, for alleged assault. And this is going back to 13th of April 2017. So it's going back quite a long way. This even predates Amber Heard's op-ed. So, you know, by more than a year, I think a year and 6 months. So I'm going to, so again, if you're in chat and you like, where are you getting this from? Are you sucking it out of your thumb? If you want me to provide the link, I will. But it's interesting that some people just dismiss it out of hand. Oh, this is not pro Johnny Depp. It must be fake. It must be wrong. It must be not true. Just for a moment, keep your mind open. So
Nick, is this like
also
something
not
that's being talked about on social media a lot? Like, are there, like, is this the next, like, now that we've gotten past this court case, it's not publicly talked about a lot yet? I haven't seen much about this.
No. In fact, when I put it up, everyone was like, this is bogus. It's not even in the mainstream media. So I'm like, actually it is.
Yeah.
You know, kind of thing. So, so those who are like kind of getting sort of nervous and feeling like, wow, this is such an anti-Johnny Depp channel, just kind of hold your horses, because we're also going to provide the other side of the story, which is, I guess, Johnny's defense. So first we're going to provide Mr. Brooks's sort of version, which is the mainstream media version, and we're not going to spend too much time on it. And then we're going to provide the sort of defense case of like, well, actually, there's an innocent explanation for it, right? So that's kind of what we're going to do. So let's start with what GREGG Rocky Brooks says. And by the way, this is a movie location manager. And I think they were filming a movie called City of Lies. Anyway, let me just read this. It's from The Independent. This was actually written about 4 years ago. Mr. Brooks initially filed a suit in July alleging that the assault occurred on 13 April 2017. According to Mr. Brooks, the production team, this movie production team, had permission to film inside a particular hotel until 10 p.m. Permission to film until 7 p.m. outside the hotel, 7 p.m. outside the hotel, and until 10 p.m. inside the hotel. And after getting the curfew extended, they were kind of told, okay, guys, you need to wrap up. You know, you've kind of gone beyond it. That's enough now, kind of thing. And when the location manager went to the film director, a guy called Brad Furman allegedly said, why don't you tell Johnny that? Why don't you tell him, okay, we've got to stop. We've got to kind of just stop here and go home, kind of thing. And I think that in itself is quite interesting. We don't know if it's true, maybe it's not true, but apparently you'd think that the director would go to the actor and say, okay, guys, this is a situation, or just call the whole thing. But apparently he said, I'm not going to tell Johnny, you go and tell Johnny. And that's when this whole thing happened. Mr. Brooks says he approached, so he actually didn't go to Johnny when this happened. So the director said, you go and tell Johnny that. And the location manager was like, I'm not going to do that. So he went to an on-site police officer. Some people called him a security guard. And or he was trying to get to this guy. And then Johnny sort of apparently kind of got him first, kind of not interrupted, but sort of interjected and kind of said, and so this is quoting from the article. He said, apparently, who the F are you? You have no right to tell me what to do. I don't give a F who you are, and you can't tell me what to do. So swearing and whatever. I think the impression was this guy's going to try and close down the shoot for the day. And Johnny was like, that's not going to happen. You don't tell me what to do, blah, blah, blah. That's the kind of narrative. Now, that's the narrative from The Independent. Now we go to another media source, and this just provides a little bit more information. According to Brooks, he was actually working with Johnny Depp on the set. Johnny reportedly, according to this guy, Johnny punched him more than once. I don't know if that means twice, but I guess more than once. It says here that Brooks told the director of City of Lies that he needed to wrap everything up for the day and that Depp's next take needed to be his last. So he's basically saying, Johnny, this is it. This is going to be your last take of the day, and that isn't. And apparently, it was like Johnny was like, "No, you don't tell me what to do." That's kind of the scenario. And then it goes on to say, Brooks alleges that he was tasked with informing Depp that he needed to end shooting for the night, and he's not very happy because he thought that should have been the director's job. The director should have told him to, that was the case. Then he said he went to look on set for a security guard. So he apparently even wanted a security guard to accompany him. And then, but the actor approached him first. In this particular version, it says, Brooks noted that Johnny Depp smelled of alcohol and behaved as if he was drunk. So quite a strong allegation there. And then he also said, so within this thing, he then punched angrily and forcefully this guy twice in the ribs. So that was where he's punched. And then what's quite interesting is after, and this is just within the scenario, after the scenario where the location manager is now apparently being hit, Depp apparently then yelled at him, "I'll give you $100,000 if you punch me right back," which sounds kind of weird, doesn't it? So it's like, if you punch me right back right now, I'll give you $100,000. And he actually said, punch me in the face right now. And then this is the aftermath. The aftermath of all of this was when Brooks returned to the set the following week. He was asked to sign a document. Now, they don't say here that it's a non-disclosure agreement, but I don't know what else it would have been. It says here he was asked to sign a document that he wouldn't sue Depp or the production team over what happened. And then he said he wouldn't sign it. And then he was fired. Then he was taken off the production. We also know from the testimony that Amber's sister said she was asked to sign a document. She said she wouldn't, and then the next thing she was out the building. So either this is similar or it's two fictional made-up stories. Then it also says here, so far Depp and the rest of the production team have not commented on the upcoming trial, but this was about 4 years ago. Since then, we have gotten a bit more information. We're going to go through that in a moment. So I'm going to be a little bit sarcastic here, but bear with me. Non-disclosure agreements, drunkenness, violent acting out, none of this rings a bell in the Depp versus Heard case, does it? It should be another slam dunk for Camille Vasquez, who will be the attorney in this as well. Assuming it gets to trial, it's got another month, but so far it looks like it is going. So she'll be defending Johnny Depp again in an LA court this time. And that then brings us to a declaration from someone called Emma Danoff. And so I'm going to take you through what she says about this movie. So by the way, if City of Lies doesn't ring a bell, it was a movie also called Labyrinth, if you're not sure what we're talking about here. So I'm going to go through that. This just provides another narrative. So Emma says the following. I think this is kind of like an affidavit. She says, I'm an individual over the age of 18 and I'm resident of the city of blank, state of California. I have first-hand knowledge of the matters set forth herein. I think this woman was the script supervisor and her job was to take a lot of photos. So while things were happening on set, it was her job to actually kind of take photos and record. So in terms of, I guess, continuity of the film, she would necessarily know what was sort of happening every day. And so she's kind of one of Johnny Depp's witnesses. This I find quite interesting as intertextual to the Alec Baldwin thing. So where you have someone who's involved in a movie and then the other crew members sort of coming to their defense and some defending and maybe some not. Anyway, so she goes on to say, I worked on the film City of Lies, then titled Labyrinth. My job title was script supervisor. My function as script supervisor includes photographing and monitoring every detail of on-set filming, closely following every detail for verbal and visual consistency and continuity. That's number 3. At 7 p.m., so this is giving us the timeline, at 7 o'clock in the evening on April 12th, 2017, I photographed John C. Depp II, or Mr. Depp, meeting with homeless individuals who were on the street where City of Lies filming was taking place. The photograph shows Mr. Depp speaking with a small group of homeless individuals. He gave them money and gifts. So I think what we've already established is that at 7 o'clock in the evening, the outside of the hotel, that was when the filming was allowed till on the outside of the hotel. That was when it stopped at 7 o'clock. And at 7 o'clock, Johnny was sort of doing something with homeless people. Filming inside the hotel would sort of only be permitted till 10. Now, I'm not quite sure if she mentions that here, but anyway, she goes on to say, we moved outside and were to begin filming our exterior scene at 10:55 p.m. Now we know that this is now well beyond the 7 p.m. deadline for outside. Remember, the inside deadline was 11 p.m. At precisely 11, so this is really kind of exact, at precisely 11:08 p.m. on the evening of April 12, per the time clock on the photograph, so according to the metadata, Mr. Depp was sitting a few inches away from me on a bench looking together at the monitor. His breath did not smell of alcohol, and he was not inebriated or under any influence that I could observe or had observed during a long day of work. So it's quite interesting. This is already a point of contention. His breath smelled of alcohol? No, it didn't. Mr. Depp had already been working all day on the film. This was a special day on the set, as somebody's mother's blah, 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 family was visiting the set to watch filming. So now we come to point number 5. At that moment, the film's location scout, Rocky Brooks, I've also referred to him as location managers. Interesting, she kind of almost reduces him to location scout. Encountered an African-American homeless woman. It's also quite interesting that the race is mentioned here. About 25 feet from where I was sitting with Mr. Depp, Mr. Brooks loudly and aggressively berated the woman. So now it's almost like becoming a racial thing. So now the accusation is that Mr. Brooks shouted at a African-American woman, and I think it's that Johnny then rushed to her defense. So it's not clear what this woman did to upset Mr. Brooks, just that he started shouting at her with racial and derogatory slurs for being in his presence and in his way. And she writes, he was pissed. She was unable to follow his commands. I heard most of Mr. Brooks's unkind words to her. Mr. Depp also heard it. So now it's almost like the contention that Johnny attacked Mr. Brooks is now that Mr. Brooks attacked a homeless woman and Johnny kind of defended her. That's kind of the way it's going. Mr. Depp said to Mr. Brooks, you can't talk to her like that. You think she's is something less than you. Who do you think you are? How dare you? That's quite interesting that this woman has got this verbatim. She's quoting verbatim what this guy's saying. Johnny exchanged words with Mr. Brooks in this manner for approximately 20 seconds. That's pretty detailed, as confirmed by my photographs, and then he came back and sat down at 11:09 p.m., as confirmed by the timestamp photograph. There were no punches or shoves. There was no offer of $100,000 to punch Mr. Depp. They were close to each other, but Mr. Depp never touched Mr. Brooks. I remained 10 feet away from the incident during its short duration. I have 40 time-stamped photographs of the entire incident. Later, after filming wrapped at 12:31, that's quite late, that's like an hour and a half after the deadline, inside the Barclay Hotel, and that's per timestamped photograph, I was in the hallway doing post-shoot paperwork. Mr. Depp went up to Mr. Brooks, and Mr. Brooks appeared about 5 feet from me and hugged. So Mr. Depp said no hard feelings after Mr. Brooks said what he said was in the heat of the moment. Then they both departed. I declare under penalty of perjury under the laws of the United States, blah, 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 blah. So that's the counter argument. That they hugged. I think there's even stories that a selfie was taken and everything ended happily ever after. Well, now this case is going to court. So, you know, I think you can kind of make the comment that is Mr. Brooks an opportunist that he's looked at this case that has happened? Has Amber Heard reached out to Mr. Brooks, or is this just something that has been floating in the ether? But the timing certainly does seem quite interesting, doesn't it? Do you know what I'm saying? It's quite interesting, the timing of this, that basically a month after the conclusion of one trial, there's now something else that's suddenly coming out. It definitely is quite interesting. So we're going to see what happens there. So that's the first thing I wanted to deal with. The second one is dealing with jurors. Now, have you guys heard the juror in question? Have you guys heard have you heard the testimony of, not the testimony, the comments made by this guy who's apparently the juror? Have you heard it, Lisa?
I have not.
Okay.
I'm curious, very curious.
Okay. So, yeah, so I actually think it could be legitimate. He sounds like he is the right, it fits the profile, but I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But one thing I've got to say, based on listening to what he says, is he sounds very warm and fuzzy. He's like, guys, we must be kind to each other. We must love one another. I don't want to be unkind to anyone. It's very fluffy, warm and fuzzy, and that's not kind of what court cases are all about. Court cases are about facts, not feelings. Court cases are about evidence, not emotions. And that's a little bit more of my concern in terms of this particular person, if it is the real person. I don't know if you guys noticed that. He said quite a lot about we must be kind to one another and we must have love towards one another. It's just like, don't you want to talk about the facts and the evidence that you were listening to? And you did a little bit, but it was very fluffy, I thought.
Do you have any quotes, like where do you have any direct quotes of what he said, and what does that have to do with like the judgment? Like,
so he let me just go to Patreon.
It's actually kind of funny to hear you say that, because meanwhile, like the rest of the world like wants to kill everybody in the courtroom, and like
exactly.
The juror in there wants to kill everyone.
So he was also asked something about, how do you feel about Elaine Brederhoft saying that the jurors broke the rules, which was kind of a euphemism of saying, how do you feel about opposing counsel, or how do you feel about Amber's lawyer basically saying you guys went on social media? I think it's just so ironic that a trial by TikTok, like a day after it ends, apparently one of the jurors goes onto TikTok and he says how horrible, also, Amber was just absolutely ridiculous, and I don't know why she was looking at me the whole time, and basically just adding to all that. He also said something that, so this answers your question, Lisa. Apparently, one of the things he said, which is potentially useful in an appeal, was he said, I think someone asked, did you believe Amber, or did you believe Johnny, or whatever? And anyway, he said something like, I think Amber instigated things, and then Johnny may have responded, something like that. In other words, kind of talking about mutual abuse. But if that is true, then he actually failed in his job as a juror, because even if there was mutual abuse, it doesn't matter who's the instigator, then it means Amber Heard was abused. Do you know what I mean? So in other words, if Amber slapped Johnny through the face and Johnny then slapped her through the face, Johnny did hit her, and so saying that, writing an op-ed and saying blah 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 is technically true. Do you know what I mean? And it doesn't really matter who started it. That's actually not relevant. And he actually said this, and so that's why I'm saying, in a situation like that, if you'd been tested on that and shown some of these intricacies in terms of defamation law with things like DV, do you know how to apply it? So you kind of have a little tutorial, maybe it lasts an hour, with all the little variations, right? And not make the trial itself the test of whether you understand how to apply it, because that's ultimately what happens. Is you only realize that the jurors knew what they were doing when they come to the verdict, and then it's too late. I think you need to know before the time, does this guy understand that? Do they understand that? Do they understand, you know what I mean? To me, it's not like rocket science, not like so hard to explain a couple of the basic realities in the thing. And you can even put it on the wall, like these are the I know Rottenborn was trying to explain it, but I still don't think he explained it. Having the one counsel explain it seems like it's just an argument. It doesn't seem like it's the law. You need it like on the wall of the jury room, like this is what the law says, you know, but in layman's terms, right? You can't have the verdict be the test where you find out that the jury understand how to apply the law or not. You've got to have that test before, and then you know, okay, this jury is going to be fair. Otherwise, you're wasting everybody's time. You know, you're wasting. It's just a waste of time. It's a gamble.
Hey, Nick, I have a question. This is kind of taking a little bit off that topic, but I know it's an area that we wanted to go into. Why was this case televised? Was it requested by the media? Is it something that Johnny's team supported? Because this is a civil case. It's not a criminal case. It's actually unusual to have a civil case be televised. I mean, not unheard of, but
yeah, that's a good point, because somebody, I think a journalist somewhere, said that this is the first case of its kind that's ever been televised, meaning where you are talking about domestic violence in this gritty detail and it's televised. If you think about it, it's actually ridiculous. And I know Elaine Breederhoff opposed it unsuccessfully. So what does that tell you? That Johnny wanted all of this to come out. He wanted, I guess, global humiliation. Amber didn't. Yeah.
Well, I think, I don't know. This ties.
I don't know if it's Amber. It could be her counsel that felt that way.
Yeah. You know, we've talked before about cameras.
Hi, Daniela.
And I'm definitely a proponent of them as it pertains to criminal cases, because criminal cases are it relates to, you know, it matters to the public. It relates to the public's well-being and safety. And so, you know, the public does have a right to go to those cases, to view those cases, and to see those cases, you know, if they're going to be shown on TV. I'm a big proponent of that type of transparency. But in a civil case, it's between two people, and the repercussions are monetary. I'm not quite sure how that affects the public. It's actually really none of the public's business. I understand there's issues of, you know, violence and things like that the public is concerned about, and I get that. But at the end of the day, the topic of this discussion in court was about libel, about, you know, what one person, what he said, what she said. This is not a criminal case, you know, alleging that somebody did something violently to somebody else. That content exists in this case, obviously, because it's a matter of what is true and what's not. But what the hell right do we have as a public to sit here and watch what's going on? But
I think when people were watching, sorry to interrupt, but I think when people were watching, they suddenly felt like they did have that right. And that's the part where I felt really uncomfortable. It's like, shut up and listen and be respectful, because this is like, you know, I kind of really felt like, can you not put yourself in that person's position? Like, if you were getting divorced and everyone was listening in on it, and people are like having a party and making jokes about what you're talking about, the most innermost details about your relationship. And it's like, wow, do you just not know how to behave? Like, are you a grown-up? What is actually going on here? I just want to touch on sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to touch on, Yvonne says the judge was also for it being televised. And Kathy says it should not have been televised. I must say, as a journalist, I've always supported televising cases. After this, I'm definitely not supportive of it. A murder trial maybe, but this kind of thing, it's the risk of ruining the, how can I put it? It's not only going to have an impact on women coming forward in other cases, in other contexts, but also it's potentially tainted this jury, making the entire thing like shooting yourself in the foot. So televising this, and then the internet goes nuts, and then the jury goes home every day, and then they get some of that nutsness, you know what I mean, sprinkled all over them, go back to court over and over again for 6 weeks. Yeah. There was also a 10-day gap. Did you know that? There was a 10-day gap in the middle of the trial, 10 days, right? And then also 3 days between verdict, kind of verdict watch part 1, and then 3 days, and then verdict watch part 2. All of those opportunities to be tainted, and you know, I don't know, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, do people, you know, so if everything should be televised, so I mean, does that mean that, like, you know, everybody's divorce cases should be televised and everybody's bankruptcy cases should be televised? Like, we don't, like, I think that, like, you know, a massive problem that we have in America is our entitlement. Who the hell are we to be entitled to see every single thing that happens in a courtroom? Sure, things are public record and you can go and request them if you want, but this idea that we must be able, you know, to, on matters that aren't relevant necessarily to public safety. I'm sorry, but I will argue this case is not relevant to public safety. It's very unfortunate that this couple clearly has, each of them has their own set of issues, you know, whether it be anger, whether it be addiction, manipulation, across the board. I mean, I can see it in both of them, and I certainly think they both need their own levels of help. But who are we as a society to step into every single person's business and not only have an opinion about it, but have an opinion about it to the extent that like literally want to exile people, like to islands and make them pariahs and take away their jobs and take away their livelihoods? I mean, it is like, I mean, some of the things that I see online is some of the ugliest stuff I have seen in a long time, and it gets worse and worse and worse with every year that passes.
I know you're going to read. You're going to read some of that.
I'm going to go off. I'm about
well,
to go
I just want to touch on Beverly Bond says, "Are you people Americans?" Well, Lisa is. Someone says, "High profile, big difference from us going to court." But to me, you know, if you want to talk about, you know, trying to remove bias out the system, think about, like, you have 100 people coming in every day that are Johnny Depp fans. When Johnny steps in, there's a whole crowd that is screaming outside. When Johnny steps out, there's a whole crowd screaming outside. Is that a factor? When the jury leave the court and they go home, they see Johnny Depp fans and they see signs. So I'm just saying, talk about bias. How do you remove bias from the system? But I mean, the big problem is social media. And what is quite interesting with this one juror, if it is him, he said, no. In one of his very first videos, he said he didn't go on social media, but of course he's on social media immediately now, and he's on TikTok. I find it very interesting that the first place he went to is TikTok. And the impression I got is that if he didn't go on social media, and in a way I kind of believe him that he didn't, because he seems like a good person. He sounds like a good person. But nevertheless, I wouldn't be surprised if someone did go on social media and told him about it, or someone went on social media and commented about it. I wouldn't be surprised if he was exposed to someone talking about it or commenting about it when he was having dinner or something like that. I really wouldn't be surprised, because it's inescapable. So what else are you going to talk about, you know? I'm going to say that during the entire 6 weeks of this trial, I didn't go into TikTok once. I didn't feel any need to go into TikTok. I can also say during the entire 6 week period of the trial, I don't think I spent more than, I don't know what it is, maybe half an hour on other channels' YouTube videos, hearing their analysis. So I spent quite a lot of time watching the trial itself. I didn't really go and ingratiate myself in the superior wisdom of other channels. And I know probably most people out there did. They got their education from other YouTubers. And of course, it was all the same thing. Yeah. Okay, so Lisa, do you want to read that? So Lisa's not going to give the name of the person, but it's something she saw on Facebook where this person was dispensing her wisdom on what should happen to Amber Heard.
I do, but there's a couple other things I want to say before, like to lead up to that. I think this part of the conversation needs to come first. So one of the things you and I were talking about yesterday was, so two things. First of all, why is there so much support for Johnny? But more importantly, how is there so much support for Johnny? And I think they're two different things. So the why is pretty easy to answer, right? If you're a fan of Johnny's, if you've watched his movies, if you like his characters, you identify, it means something to you. Maybe gave you something to your life, and we've all watched movies, we've all identified with characters, and they mean something to us. And the idea that like this person might not be what we thought them to be feels like betrayal, right? And we're already a fractured society enough, and so I think that people obviously don't want to see that, right? So it's understandable that people love their heroes, they love their celebrities. I get that. But as far as like, how is this support taking place? Like, why is social media completely, like absolutely a Johnny love fest? And I just, out of curiosity, last night I'm like, I'm just going to scroll. I'm going to do the nighttime death scroll. I'm going to check what people are seeing. I literally in the course of a half an hour didn't find one single post in support of Amber. And not even in support of her, just maybe saying like, hey guys, maybe we should like back off a little, calm down a little or something. Nothing. I mean, 100% support across the board for Johnny. So how does that happen? Well, I think what you were talking about yesterday about the power of the social media machine and algorithms and how this stuff works is absolutely the answer to it. So, there very early on, I think that there were groups of Johnny Depp fans that made a very conscious effort how they were going to engage social media for their plight, right? So it really only takes like, and obviously he has the means within his celebrity, more so than her, to have these massive networks that you can get into and start populating these messages. So, that's one piece of it. But then you also have, it is a huge business now for podcasting and TikToking and YouTube and all of this stuff. People are trying to create businesses from it. They recognize, whether they believe in the plight or not, if I hashtag something, if I get behind a save this person or justice for this person, all I have to do is put this on my account, and I'm going to get like 500,000 people tonight that are going to be looking at my stuff.
Absolutely.
It's opportunistic.
I can tell you, Lisa, I made a handful of videos, and each time I did, I got punished. But what I did, and what I do with all my videos, is I will share it on Twitter, and then I'll find the relevant hashtag, right? And I found if I made a video that was somewhat sympathetic to Amber Heard, there was no Amber Heard hashtag. It was Amber Turd committed perjury. It was just like one after another, the hashtags were all taken. Just like you try and just like say hashtag Amber Heard and it's kind of not there. Another one that was like didn't seem to even exist was justice for Amber Heard, right? And that alone just shows you that the bias was like 100% Johnny Depp. And we're going to talk a little bit about why culturally that is significant and what is actually happening in terms of psychology, mass psychology, the psychology of the mob, the psychology of the coliseum, what is actually taking place behind this thing. I don't know if you want to talk quickly about.
I want to take this a little bit. Sorry. Yeah. Can I just take it to the next step? Because some of this kind of like, it all ties into each other. But I just want to say, like, think about when you were a kid in school and you're out on the playground and, and you've got cliques, right? I mean, this goes back to when we're kids and like the whole concept of like bullying. Like if there's a group that's the popular group and has the popular idea that everybody's following, And you know, on the other side of that, like if I speak up, if I say something different, I'm going to get my ass kicked out here in the schoolyard. You know, I'm not going to have any friends. Like, you know, I'm going to be the pariah. Like, so, you know, I mean, that's kind of what happens as a child. And like, and then now, like, here we are as adults doing the same thing on social media. And when I read this quote, you're going to understand exactly what I'm talking about. Like, this person actually taunts people saying, like, if you dare do this, this is what's going to happen to you. It is flat out tribalism and bullying. And look, this is not about, like I've said from the beginning, I didn't watch this trial. I have no idea what was proven, disproven. I don't like Amber. I don't like Johnny. I think all of it is a fucking shit show. Like, I want to watch that about as much as I want to hear my neighbors argue. I don't give a shit what they're doing in their life. It doesn't matter to me. Okay, so I'll just put that out there first of all. But what really aggravates the shit out of me is when something becomes about, like, it's not about what it is, right? You're not actually focusing on what's happening here. That in itself is injustice. If we're going to talk about real justice, focus on the case, focus on the merits of the case. Stop with the Amber turds, stop with the mega pints, stop with all of this bullshit, and talk about this like we're fucking adults. Like, seriously. And stop,
I mean, what's with name calling? I mean, gee,
yeah,
so juvenile.
I mean, if somebody wants to sit down and have a conversation and say, listen, I watched this trial and this is my assessment. I don't believe Amber because of this, this, and this. I don't believe Johnny because this, this, and this. I believe, you know, Johnny won. That's all fine and well. Great. You know what? You have, even though I disagree with the cameras, you saw it, you have a right to judge it. That's what you do in a courtroom. You judge it. That's fine. I have no issues with that whatsoever. It's all of the vitriol, right? So, so going along the lines of, like, you know, why does Johnny have so much support is also, why is Amber so hated? Like, what is it about Amber Heard that is so hated? And for me, I mean, this is my takeaway with it. This is what I think it is. This is something else that you and I talked a little bit about. There is so much, like, anger and hatred and frustration right now in this world. A lot of it is post-COVID driven. You know, people have been left in terrible despair, terrible disconnectedness, a lot of anger. And like, I feel like I need to point that at something. I feel like I need to have my piece of vengeance, which is also why people stood up schools. And that's a whole other conversation too. But it's like, she is, again, take away what you think about her personally, but why is there this, like, this massive outpouring of hatred? She is the embodiment, like, literally right now at this moment in time, she has become the embodiment of all of this anger and despair, I believe, that is going on in the world. You know, let me, so while I'm there, let me go ahead and read what this person said. So this person is a high profile analyst on cases. She's in, you know, many shows that you guys have probably all watched. And I'm like, oh God, I'm going to go to her page and see, I can imagine what the hell she's going to say. And so she didn't disappoint. Some of this is paraphrased a little bit, but it's mostly her quote. So she starts out by saying, and by the way, I don't disagree with her. I disagree where she takes it, but she says, at their core, most people crave fairness and justice. Even research on toddlers shows that babies like people who do good and they dislike people that do not. As mature adults, we crave fairness and justice, and we want to see perpetrators punished. That, you know, I really, last night I was kind of sitting here just, you know, in my own head thinking, why is punishment always necessary? Is it necessary? Why are we entitled to have punishment for stuff? Should we be entitled to it? So,
well, in,
you know,
defamation, the idea, like, you can, I remember a defense lawyer was saying very early on, she should get $1 and he should get $1. That's it. They kind of got mutually destructive arguments. So, and I didn't really agree with that, but you didn't have to even award millions of dollars. You could have awarded nothing. And I think the fact that the jury did elect to make it a couple of million shows that they wanted some sting in the tail, for sure, you know. But they didn't actually have to punish anybody. I mean, Amber's been punished quite a lot as it is. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, so then she goes on to say, then she then takes it to the Holocaust. This is literally, she is now talking about the Holocaust in relation to Amber and Johnny Heard and Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. She says there was no better feeling for Holocaust survivors to learn the fate of their perpetrators who were put to death for all to see. As the Bible says, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. That's why so many people have lashed out at Amber with death threats, and they've even, like threatened the life of her child, which is disgusting. I mean, that's heinous on all levels, but it goes back to that same feeling of there must be punishment for this. Whatever the crime is, obviously the more heinous the crime is, the more heinous the punishment should be. But that, this thought that Amber must be punished. So I agree. I mean, I generally agree with what she's saying. That is kind of how we exist as a society. But then she says, Amber will get her justice by being cut off from Hollywood and thus having no career and going bankrupt. And anyone, and she particularly calls out like women's groups, anybody who dares to say that they're on Team Amber or tries to defend her has their own issues to examine, and they should be cut off and disregarded. The final sentence of her quote, Amber will not succeed in society as it will be next to impossible. Perhaps she can go to a remote place in the world where no one knows her, like Antarctica.
Yeah. Well, I mean that's
like literally my head wants to explode. Is this where we want to exist as human beings? That in viewing somebody's lies and arguments and stuff within the course of their marriage, that they should have everything from their life and livelihood stripped away, sent to an island, and anybody who dares say anything nice about them, you should fucking go to that island too. Is that where we want to be in America? Are we cool with that? I'm not.
Yeah. When you said to me, when we spoke about it, we sort of had an hour-long conversation when we were sort of talking about like why, just in a general sense, why has there been this TikTok explosion? What's actually going on? Like, and you said it's kind of like there's a lot of pent-up emotion and frustration and anger and lots of other things. Some of it from COVID, some of it's just like people have been unable to let loose and let their hair down, and I think that is true. And if you think about it, in a way, Amber Heard represents someone spoiling the party. Amber Heard represents this person who, in this situation, is telling him, don't drink. In that situation, don't do that. And is trying to sort of hold him back. And it's like, no, let me let loose kind of thing, But I think that goes beyond that. And I think it goes to when you're feeling anxious and you're feeling frustrated and you're feeling angry and it's so much, you're not quite sure why you're feeling that way. You were also talking about in your WhatsApp to me, I think you were saying, we're just such a disconnected society, and what is the other word that you used? This vast emptiness, I think, or vast loneliness.
That vast feeling of despair and disconnectedness.
This vast feeling of despair, and a lot of that came from COVID, but it sort of hasn't gone away. In its place is now a kind of economic threat. There's like this economic threat of what's going to happen, and then there's also the threat of war, and COVID hasn't really gone away. But there's, in other words, there's this unusual amount of anxiety, this unusual amount of frustration, and people want to vent it on someone. And you had the same thing in Rome with the Coliseum, where things weren't that great. Maybe the plumbing wasn't great, and wars weren't being won. Well, guess what? We can all go to the Coliseum. You guys can watch somebody rip someone else apart, and you can go home happy. That's going to sort out your perception of all your gripes and frustrations. That's going to sort it out. Yeah. And if you guys remember the movie Gladiator, the Caesar at the times was like, you know what? I don't want to deal with all these problems. There are a lot of problems. Let's just have games and everyone's going to be happy. And that actually did solve the problem. The people were happy. but nothing was actually solved. And this is kind of the same thing. I'm not going to pay attention to the war in Ukraine. I'm sick of COVID. I'm sick of that. I'm going to, for 6 weeks, just be a voyeur in somebody else's garbage. And I'm going to become part of this massive mob. And I'm going to belong, and we're going to be omnipotent in our power to destroy a person. And that's going to make, I'm going to get up in the morning with a big smile on my face. I'm going to enjoy tearing somebody else down. That's going to make me feel good about myself and good about my day. That is what we're really talking about. And that's what we find really, really disturbing. Because if you take that psychology of this whole huge group of people that are sort of targeting a particular person, you say, well, what if those people have got guns? So I disagree with you. I don't like you. I whatever. Now, but now they've got a gun. So in other words, you turn the social media tearing down into something other. And the question is, isn't it already happening? Isn't what you're talking about already happening? This idea of society being destroyed by social media. And something I said to you, I think, on WhatsApp was, you know, there's a link between this case and social media. There's a link between social media totally clouding this case like it's lost in the smoke. Like what is actually going on in the smoke? Where does the case start and the bias end, right? But in the same way with mass shooters, it's now also related to social media. Mass shooters are using social media now to perpetrate what they're doing. They're triggered by social media, and then they use social media to trigger. And it's becoming clearer and clearer that our society is destroyed. And social media has got a big role to play in that. Social media is not harmless. It's harmful. And it's not like it did destroy society. It did, and it is. It's continuing.
Yep. You know, in regards to, so there's a couple other things that I wanted to touch on. Mass shootings obviously is a big one. All of this ties together. These are not separate things that are going on. And again, this was what kind of compelled me and got me so inspired when you and I started talking about it, because this isn't simply like, you know, a celebrity trial. It is absolutely, like I said, the poster child of everything that is wrong, the cancer in our society right now. It touches on all of these issues. They're all interconnected. I don't know if Cotton Star is here in the chat. If you are, say hi.
But there's a couple.
Okay, there's a couple of things he said recently.
Cotton Star just said that Dr. Oz won his primary. And that's the state of the world today.
Yeah. All right. So I've used my allotment of F-bombs. I apologize to anybody who's offended. But so
Bruce
there's a couple of things.
That's a good point. Bruce T says social media is antisocial. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. So there's a couple of things that I want to mention, actually, that he's talked about recently. I want to give him his kudos, because these are definitely his quite keen and intelligent thoughts. You know, he and I have talked a lot about, you know, the shootings that have been taking place and have taken place recently. And, you know, you always hear, you know, what initially happens, the police come out and they say, you know, we just don't know the motivation yet. We just don't know. And Nick, you've written about this too in your books as well. It's actually absurd to say that we just don't know what this is, because at the end of the day, and this is me, you know, quoting Cotton Star, and he's absolutely right. There's one reason. There's always one underlying reason why these shooters go in and do what they do. Because they have not been validated in life, because they have inadequacies, because they feel like they've been wronged, which, by the way, as I'm talking, do you hear a trend? Does not majority of America feel this way right now? What they do is they go into a place that means something to them, a school, a store, a movie theater, a church, and they take back what was taken from them. It's their ability to control that situation and say, screw you, society, I'm taking it back. And they go in and that's what they do. And, you know, I feel like all of this anger that exists, whether, you know, it's taking a gun and shooting somebody up, or whether it's going online and, you know, telling everybody that they, you know, should live on an island because I find you repulsive and I don't want you here anymore, and I want to control the kind of people that are in this world. It's all tied to the same thing. this unbelievable anxiety and anger that exists in people, and they need to find an outlet for it. It terrifies me, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think it's a sense of humiliation. What I found really astonishing was when I studied up a little bit on the war in Ukraine, it was, what was the motivating factor was make Russia great again. It's this idea that Russia feels humiliated. Russia feels like we're losing territory, we're losing empire, whatever. And so it's like, and that is literally, when you have this self-esteem issue, it leads to violence. If it's serious enough, if your self-esteem issue is serious enough, it leads to violence. You feel like you can't get your self-esteem back by, I don't know, negotiation, hard work, effort. Well, I'll take it back through force. That's literally how people think. And it's a very serious thing where you have so many people feeling aggrieved, and they don't know what the normal way is to be civil. And so what's the response? Will you then be, you then not civil, right? Should we move on to Asian culture?
Hold on a second. Terry Dean made a comment in there about entitlement. Agree with you 100%. That's the other part of the problem, is that we have these feelings of, that something's been done wrong to us, and we want to take that back, and we feel entitled to do so. So here's another thing to go deeper down the rabbit hole into social media about entitlement and conspiracy theories. At the center of that is mistrust. Everybody mistrusts somebody now. They mistrust the government, they mistrust police, they, mistrust, politicians, religious leaders, doctors, whatever. Everybody has their own reason for mistrusting something, and like at a massive level. So, this is kind of where then conspiracy theories like come into play, and why this is so dangerous. You have so many vulnerable people online, and this massive machine that has these algorithms that can tap into what matters to you, and they're going to barrage you daily with all of these things that matter to you to get into the core of you. And as they do that, and as they embolden you, it entitles you. And we have, I don't want to get into the whole gun debate and all that kind of stuff, but but we know, we see this all the time, where whatever side you stand on, there is so much information, so many groups out there that are saying, fight for your rights, take it back. It's the only way to to own your life. Take your rights back. You are American. This is the country we live in. We are free. We should live free. We should be able to do whatever we want. Me, myself, and I. It's overwhelming. And so it's actually, again, terrifying that these issues of anger and anxiety exist at the same time. Entitlement exists, and this machine exists to take ideas and plant them into your head. It's like we're literally creating monsters in every single one of us. So
it's almost like it goes hand in hand.
It does.
Aggravates, like whatever is there, it just enhances. Someone that I think, I'm not sure if Beverly Bond is a regular subscriber, but she says, Lisa, you talk about why should we punish, then wonder why we have shootings. We need more guns, more law enforcement, and more punishment for wrongdoing. Beverly, I kind of had a thought, which is, just follow what I'm saying here. There's something happens, and then people say it's because of mental health. And I'm sure you disagree. I'm sure you agree that that's not the solution, that it's not like just mental health. But just take it a little bit further. When you say it's mental health, whose problem is that? So you say, okay, this thing happened over here, and the problem is mental health. Okay, well, whose problem is the mental health? What is your answer to that? And I think some people would say, well, it's the problem of the person who committed this. And I would say, no, I think the problem for mental health is the potential perpetrator, but also the environment that is making the potential perpetrator. This perpetrator that feels unhappy, who feels isolated, who feels all these different things, who feels excluded, who feels judged or whatever. Is living in a community that's not very friendly, is living in a hostile community, and so he commits a hostile act. So in terms of the mental health thing, I think the thing isn't just the mental health of this person, it's actually the mental health of the community. And where do you start with that? It starts with you, but it doesn't end with you. It ends with the community needs to become a village. And, you know, there's a saying, it takes a village to bring up a person, right? That saying. When last was any community a village? I mean, the social media has destroyed villages. Even though we live in cities, we're so isolated from one another. I mean, it's ridiculous. And it's just so divisive. The hate that you see on social media for someone that you don't even know is just like, it's like instant. I didn't like what you said. Now I'm going to be as nasty as possible. Where are your manners? Like, what has happened to just knowing how to, I don't know, people just seem to have completely lost the ability to be nice to one another and to give one another an opportunity to sort of, now it's like, are you part of my tribe? You're not, I hate you. That's how quick and easy it is.
Well, this it also kind of ties into what I was saying about punishment. And I just want to clear something up really quickly. When I say, do we need punishment? I'm not talking about like doing away with like punishment for criminals. Obviously, yes. I mean, there needs to be repercussions for people in society for breaking laws. I support that. And I recognize that to varying degrees, you know, some of our punishments are out of whack. Sometimes they're not enough. Sometimes they're too much. You know, it just depends. But I'm all for punishing criminals. I'm really talking more largely about us as people. Do we require punishment to feel whole again? How much is enough? Like, I mean, have you ever really sat and asked yourself that question when something has been, somebody just posted in chat asking us if either one of us have been devastated by a narcissist. I can answer that. I know I can answer that for you too, Nick. We both have. Okay. So, you know, I think most people have at some point in their life. You get to a certain age, you probably have been. But I'm sure we've all at some point in our life sat down and thought, what's going to make me whole again? And is the answer really punishment of that person, vengeance on that person? Is that really going to make you whole again? I just think that we need to examine that in ourselves. If we want to be a better society, how much punishment is enough? I think it's an important question to ask. You know, eye for an eye it's a biblical idea. And so, you know, you're going to believe what you want to believe. Does everything have to be an eye for an eye? I don't know. You know, we probably don't want to go there, but we talked on conspiracies a little bit. I just saw somebody post in the chat as well about this is how, I actually don't want to say it out loud, but there's a group that starts with a letter that's very far at the end of the alphabet. I just think it's relevant in this conversation. I actually made some notes about it myself. It's the reason why we have so much conspiracy theory. And it's not to say that conspiracies don't exist. Sometimes they do, but I'm talking this pervasive issue of people generally believing in conspiracies over, you know, what's usually reality is, again, at the heart of it is mistrust. You know, people do not trust their government. They don't trust their officials. They just generally think that like there's some other big story going on behind the scene than, you know, what is actually in front of their face. And social media allowed this group that begins with a letter, literally created a group out of an idea, right? So there was a couple of posters that, you know, went by this initial and put these ideas out there, and it grew and grew and grew until it became this massively big group of people that follow this conspiracy theory that's, you know, pretty radical. And like, I was just kind of doing some reading up on this recently. Today, I mean, there's varying polls on this and varying studies on this as far as like what percentage of people actually believe in this conspiracy theory. They think that potentially upwards of 16% of Americans believe in this conspiracy theory that was 100% driven on social media and began as somebody, quite frankly, who had mischievous thoughts about like wanting to get this out into the world. I mean, I think most people can recognize this person or this group of people had an idea of what they wanted to do with this theory.
But I think
and it exploded.
I think what's taking place is at the same time that there's alienation, isolation, social media offers this false promise of belonging. It offers this false fairy tale of, well, you belong to this group, and so there you go. But it's not really like that, you know.
And playing on people's vulnerability that you can't trust anybody, that everything is not what it seems.
With social media, it's almost like taking a drug. You get this immediate kickback if you in a group that supports you, you immediately validate it with a like or a whatever, and someone who says I agree or whatever. So you get this immediate kind of reptilian response, like, oh, that felt nice, you know what I mean? And so it becomes very much binary. I hate you, I like you, kind of thing. There's no room for kind of the gray area. In fact, the more extreme you are, the more you are liked within a particular group. And so it enhances and enhances and enhances, you know?
Yeah. I hear it. So we have Andar in chat is saying, I wish more conspiracies existed. The true chaos of the world is overwhelming. It's a funny comment, but quite frankly, that is how most people feel. They don't want to believe that human beings aren't monsters, that the things that people do, like your point early on in this discussion, you know, can regular, everyday, nice human beings commit, you know, crimes, terrible crimes, varying crimes, whatever? Of course, we're all human. Nobody's a monster. Nobody's the devil. Nobody's evil. We are all flawed human beings to a variety of degrees. And the general public doesn't really want to embrace the chaos of our world. They would rather think that somebody behind the government is pulling these strings and making people do this and that and whatever. It's to your point, Andar, yes. I mean, people don't want to live in that chaos.
Okay, so I'm going to leave the Asian thing, although that's a really interesting topic. I'm just going to leave it for a second and just go on to the fourth point, cultural dystopia. And this is not very organized, although I have highlighted it. I'm going to just read a few things that I've highlighted, and Lisa, you're welcome to respond. By the way, Lisa, remember you said you don't want to really talk more than an hour. It's already 90 minutes.
Yeah, so I mean, that was a very unrealistic idea.
Okay, so this is from The Birth and Death of Meaning, Ernest Becker. And what I want you guys to think about in chat is just like open your minds and think about what you know about the Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing, whatever your opinion is on it, whatever your position is on it. Think about it in general terms. Just spread those thoughts into the rest of society. And some of what I'm going to say is going to be a direct poke. It's going to have a direct bearing on what we're talking about, and some of it's going to sort of be a glancing blow, right? I haven't written like a long script about it, so I'm going to be touching on some of the things I highlighted and just see how it reaches you, right? So the first one comes from The Birth and Death of Meaning. It deals with the inner world. Now, what is more of an inner world than the inside of a marriage between two people that you don't know? What is more of an inner world than their deepermost desires, feelings, positive feelings, negative feelings, the sexuality that is going on, the things that aren't working, the dysfunction that's taking place. That's the inner world of Johnny and Amber. And the question is, did we find out what it really was? Did the jury understand what it really was? So on page 36, it says, turds are more vital than thoughts. What do you think about that? Turds, meaning you know what, are more vital than thoughts. And this is quoting from, anyway, he talks about Carl Jung's classic anal sadistic dream. And he talks about an enormous turd falling from the sky and demolishing a church. And that's kind of the feeling I get with this case, where so the TikTok sort of explosion was like an enormous turd falling on a courtroom, falling on a court case. And all you see is the turd, and all you smell is the turd, and all you know of is the turd. And whereas what's going on in the court is destroyed, is the stink of the turd sort of overwhelms what's going on in there, and it actually destroys the structure itself, right? That was just my take from it. Anyway, Carl Jung talks about this enormous turd falling from the sky and demolishing a church. This is the adult sadist's secret scenario in which the drama of his life is based, to declare the priority and power of natural bodily external things over the murky interiors. That was also the impression I got, is that so this big sort of balloon of social media can't take the time and don't actually have the ability to sort of wait and listen and pay attention. They want to put the priority on external things, how handsome someone was, whatever movie they made, and they can't go into the murky interiors and sort of just pay attention to that. They can't wait for their eyes to adjust to the darkness. Then he writes on, hence the drama of torture that we follow breathlessly in war movies. Who will win? And in this case, courtroom dramas. Who will win? The torturer who wants to bring the victim's insides out into the light, who wants to expose the self and show its sham and impotence in the face of physical power, or the victim who will not reveal himself, who declares the vitality and priority of the inner self, even though the mangled body dies in the process. Now, what is in human nature is to say the victim who will not show the inside of herself, there's something wrong with that. You're a liar. You are deceitful. You are the problem in the story. You won't reveal who you really are because it's too subtle. So you are the villain in the story. The person who is the torturer, trying to bring the victims inside, he's actually the champion. He's the good guy. The guy who's trying to kind of like peel open the can and get to the worms inside. But that is our attitude to the sadist, is we think the sadist is the good guy. He goes on to say, the drama of the sadist is particularly interesting for the way it tries to negate and overcome the great dualism of nature that we began our discussion with. The fact that everything in creation has both an inside and an outside. The drama of sadistic torture is an attempt to declare the victory of human powers over the insides of nature. It is, and think about human powers as social media, as trying to sort of attempt to have that have priority over things like the subtleties of human emotion and things that go, the subtle, the sensitive subtleties that go on inside of a marriage. You're going to treat with this blunt instrument. It says, it is in these interiors that lies the secret vitality that man cannot fathom, that seems to mock all his efforts at order and control. In other words, our efforts to find this out are actually mocked because it's difficult to fathom. So what do? We mock it ourselves. And then he says, little wonder that the scientific revolution in the West has given such an ascendancy to the anal sadistic character type. Little wonder, too, that the great moral crisis of our time have driven him to such fiendish efforts to control and negation, the endlessly rising production curves, the mountains of superarms, the forests of shiny megaton missiles. And then he says right at the end, what is at stake in the world of the self? And what is at stake is the world itself. And that's literally what you're talking about. You might say, someone was saying, this is ridiculous. It's just the Amber Heard case, is nothing. Actually, what is at stake is the soul of our species in a way. It's like, where is it going? It's not going a very nice place. It's become a giant turd. It's become a giant turd. I don't know what you think of that, Lisa.
I agree. Sadly.
And another thing that Ernest Becker talks about is he talks about how money is also emblematic of human feces. It's also, you can buy life with money, but it's also represented as a kind of feces. And that is what has been the ultimate thing is, you said bad stuff about me, well, give me back my feces in a way, like give me feces. Okay, it's money, but it's basically in terms of that, right? And money has always been quite dirty. Like when you pick up a coin, like when during COVID, I was like, keep the change, don't give me that coin. It's going to kind of be contaminated. You know what I mean? But there's this relationship between money and death, money and feces, treasure and dirt and death. There's kind of a relationship between the two. Anyway, so that was the one thing that I highlighted. The other thing has to do with man's basic insecurity. This is from Angel in Armor, Ernest Becker, dealing with sadomasochism as weakness. And it talks about here, the sadist is not afraid of the body, but of the insides, the privacy, the hard-earned individuality that does not show itself in the flesh. This is the difference he cannot stand, the mysteriousness of the object, its separateness, its uniqueness. He cannot relate to the world on its terms. We might say that what makes him uncomfortable is the multiplicity of the world. Now, when I read that, I don't know what you guys think when you read that, but when I read that, I kind of think of Amber Heard is apparently bisexual. And so she's got this multiplicity about her. There's a subtle aspect about her. I don't know whether Johnny Depp really liked that. If Johnny Depp was paranoid, and anyone can get quite paranoid when you've had a bit to drink, well, that paranoia would be enhanced by this aspect that he just cannot fathom, right? The other thing that I thought was really interesting was whether you agree with it or not, whether you think it's true or not, it was said that Johnny is always sort of drinking, that he sort of goes through life kind of, I don't know, every day he'll do this or that. And it kind of just made me think about Johnny's ability. And if you don't like talking it that way, then talk about your own ability to deal with life on its own terms. Are you dealing with, do you use a crutch, whether it's social media or you drink a lot of coffee or whatever it is, because life is so hard to deal with on its own terms. But in terms of Johnny and Amber, Johnny's 22 years older than Amber, and his career was struggling between 2012 and 2020. And here he is with a woman much younger than him who's youthful, and it hasn't really been spoken about much. And this is something I wanted to actually ask Lisa about. Her beauty is actually threatening. It's actually fearsome. It's actually scary. And what I mean by that is, in a lot of the roles she plays, she's kind of unattainable. So even in the Aquaman role, she's sort of kind of like this really high up figure, but she's not really attainable, if I can put it that way. And I'm not sure if anyway, so the point that I'm trying to make is she plays this unattainable, really beautiful person that is a threat basically to everybody. It's a threat to men who can't get her, and it's a threat to women who aren't as beautiful as what she is, right? Whereas Johnny's kind of the everyman. He's like trying to get along and he's trying to figure out who she is, and so she becomes this villain. And when I studied up a bit about actors and so on, read a couple of biographies, you saw that certain actors, because they're incredibly good looking, they've got to kind of play against themselves. Otherwise, they turn off audiences because the audiences are intimidated. So in other words, there's a really attractive man. Male audiences feel threatened, so they don't want to watch that movie star. And it might be someone playing Superman, might be Tom Cruise. But if that actor recognizes that and says, okay, I'll try and make myself less attractive and less threatening, then it works. That threat is real. That sense of you are so perfect that you are a threat to me is very, very real when it comes to celebrities, which is why you've got attractive celebrities that sort of take on a goofiness about them, like what's her name? Something about Mary. I had her name in my mind a moment ago. That blonde actress.
Cameron Diaz.
Yeah, Cameron Diaz is a really good example. Another one is I can see her face. I must be really tired. I just can't think of her name now. She was in Miss Congeniality. What's her name again?
Sandra Bullock.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just tired. But she's a good example of a really attractive woman who plays against herself in a way. You know, it's kind of, you know what I mean?
I don't know if I would say that.
If you don't do that, you can repel your audience because they are feeling like, well, you're a threat to me. You know what I mean? And I don't know whether Amber Heard's reached that point in her career, probably not, where she sort of, maybe that's the next step for her, is to play against her type, play a villain, play someone who makes a lot of mistakes. I don't know what it is. Charlize Theron, I thought, did that really well, because Charlize Theron is the type of woman who's strong and stunning and could be threatening, but she's played roles like the one in Monster and the one in, she plays strong woman, but there's an aspect to them that is, I don't know what the word is, human. You know, like in Fury Road, where she plays this woman looking for home or whatever. She plays a strong woman, but there's another dimension to her. And, you know, that was something that came up with the Sigourney Weaver movies as well, where it was for the first time, Sigourney Weaver, when she played Ripley, that was actually supposed to be a male character. And they were worried that a woman playing this role was going to alienate other women. And Sigourney Weaver herself was worried, I don't want to be like this militant woman. I don't want to be this aggressive, militant woman. And of course, she stole the role and everybody loved her. But those things are real fears that studios have and actors have, is that I don't want to threaten my audience. I don't want to alienate my audience. And those things are very, very real, because the audience isn't perfect. And a lot of these movie stars, I'm not saying they are perfect, but they are quite close to perfect in terms of they look perfect. They're living pretty fairy tale lives. And that's also a thing that I think is quite silly is, we all are talking about celebrities that have had incredibly full, colorful lives, living in incredible palaces with so much excess. And we are kind of trying to make sure that everything is fair and good for them, when they've definitely got the resources to make sure that that's the case. And in Johnny Depp's case, he was able to pay for specialist lawyers, right? I think Johnny Depp's specialist lawyers, that they actually won him the case more than anything else. The fact that in that department, he had a specialist lawyer, very expensive, and that one. And they knew what they were doing, and definitely knew what they were doing.
I really do think that Amber is going to struggle a lot with getting roles. I mean, I think that there is definitely a double standard when it comes to public rooting for men having a comeback versus women in the celebrity world. It's not an unusual thing for a guy to go off the rails and drink a lot, do drugs, commit some crimes, whatever, and go away. And then, people really root for him to come back. Like, gosh, I hope he comes back and plays this amazing role. And they're like, yes, like you did it. Like, so proud of you. So happy for you. You don't see that all that often with a woman, maybe Martha Stewart, but she definitely picked herself up after her, little prison time. But generally, I think, women are cast to that island, like we talked about, and people want to just hate on them. They want them to become ugly. They want to see them in a newspaper gaining 50 pounds a year down the road. I think people again, with this, like this feeling of how much they dislike Amber right now, if they were to look at a newspaper a year down the road and she's got gray hair and she's missing a tooth and she's gained a bunch of weight, I think that there's some people that actually are going to be like kind of excited about that. Like it's going to feel like justice for them. And, you know, I can't reiterate it enough. This isn't about whether I think, you know, Johnny won this case or Amber won this case or who I like more or whatever, because I don't have any stake in it. I feel tremendously for people that have been in, you know, domestic violence situations that feel triggered by this, whatever side that they're on. I truly do. And I understand that that's a big part of this story. And so, you know, for those people, they need to view it through the lens that they have. I get that. I'm really talking more about the people on the periphery and how we generally treat other human beings in our space and what we hope for people. Do we hope for punishment? Do we hope for vengeance? Do we hope for repair? Do we want people to live better lives? Do we want to, like, you know, if somebody saw Amber a year down the road, the opposite, all of a sudden she landed this great role, she's looking better again, you know, she's acting a little less weird, you know, she's not making crazy statements in public. How many people are going to say, you know what, good for her? Probably not nearly as many as if Johnny were to make some transformation. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I think part of that is still a very misogynistic view in our society.
I think it's hard to say. I think on the one hand, I think we are a distracted society with very short attention spans and very short memories as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is a turnaround quite quickly. It really just comes down to getting the right role. Like Tom Cruise in Jerry Maguire. You play against type. So where Tom Cruise plays a sort of a loser, that this guy is really struggling, and you know what I mean. If you get the right role, that can really do it.
I just want to put out there that if Tom Cruise gets into like a a marital altercation, I'm going to be Team Maverick. Sorry,
Really?
I'm kidding.
Have you watched Maverick?
Sadly, no. I was going to go tonight, but I guess
I've seen it, and I was sort of quite tearful quite often.
I heard it's really good. Yeah, don't give anything away. Obviously, I'm kidding. I mean, that's my my little poke at fun there, but yeah. All right. Well,
okay. So I'm just going to go through this book. I made a couple of notes here. In our society, power resides in technology. Quite an interesting thing to think about there. And it's in a chapter titled "The Origin of Inequality." Power in the life pulse that sustains men in every epoch. And unless the student understands power figures and power sources, he cannot understand anything vital about social history. The history of man's fall into stratified society can be traced around the figures of his heroes, to whom he is beholden for the power he wants, to persevere as an organism, to continue experiencing. One of the first things a child has to learn is how much power he has and how much exists in others in the world. Only if he learns this can he be sure of surviving. Somebody said that, if you really understand abuse, how abuse works is somebody's got the power and somebody else doesn't. And I think that is a really good explanation. I think that has been true of abuse from the beginning of time till the end of time. Abuse is about one person got the power and the other person doesn't. The person who's got the power abuses their power of the person who doesn't have it. And so, I don't know, like in any discussion on this case where you say, well, Johnny Depp is by far the biggest star. I mean, who is Amber Heard? She's a nobody. Haven't you just answered the question? Haven't you just addressed that? Mm-hmm. Right? Anyway, it goes on to write, only if he learns this can he be sure of surviving. If you are wrong about power, you don't get a chance to be right about anything else. But power is an invisible mystery. It erupts out of nature in storms, volcanoes, meteors, in springtime and newborn babies, and I would also say divorces. And it returns into nature in ashes, winter, and death. Power is also, in terms of relationships, the sexual power is also invisible. You don't know what the person's thinking. You don't know what the person's really experiencing. It's invisible. Nevertheless, the power is real. Whatever it is, it's real. The other thing I want to say about Amber Heard is she has this sexual power through the fact of her youth. She's much younger than Johnny Depp. She's 36, he's 58. But when they met, it was obviously much younger. And if you take the movie in which Johnny Depp cast her, The Rum Diary, she was this sort of almost like this freak of nature, the sexual creature that his character was trying to, I don't know if the word's control or connect with, but that was the fantasy in terms of that movie. And I don't know how far that fantasy is from where their relationship went from there. I'm not saying it went from fantasy to reality. Probably stayed a kind of fantasy anyway, but that was the soil that it was in. I've also seen people in chat talking a lot about narcissism. And I just we live in a narcissistic society, and the most narcissistic people are celebrities. So I really don't know how you can have a conversation about narcissism where you say it's a big factor when both of these people are celebrities. I took a narcissism test, and some people here who don't like me, here's your chance to take notes and string me up based on what I'm saying here. But I took a narcissism test, I think when I was writing about Chris Watts, and I scored quite highly. I answered it, but from the perspective of being an author. So when it was like, do you care what someone thinks of you? I don't really care too much if I'm going to the mall or if I'm in my own neighborhood. But as an author, I do. I have to. I've got to care. I've got to care that my books are well received and I'm an effective in my work, right? But in terms of celebrity, it's absolutely part and parcel of celebrity, and a celebrity has got to have an unusual amount of narcissism, and some of that is healthy narcissism. But of course, when everybody loves you, it's very easy to become an unhealthy narcissist. And I would wager that most celebrities struggle with their own narcissism. How could you not? What is the other thing about narcissism? Yeah, so I think when I scored this narcissism test, I can't remember the value, but they said, you scored that, well, just above you would be the celebrity. So fortunately, I wasn't on the celebrity score, but they're basically saying the biggest narcissists in the world are celebrities. You're almost there. But as I say, I was responding to the test from the perspective of being an author, and also do you care what people think about what you say? Well, when I'm writing, for sure, and within the context of being an important voice in true crime, for sure. But in terms of other things, not so much. I'd also just want to read about this particular book. It's The Escape from Evil. Becker talks about the shaman, and I was reading it and I was thinking about whether or not it applies to Johnny Depp, and I want to hand that over to you guys, right? Do you guys know what a shaman is? Lisa, do you know what a shaman is? You know what it is?
I mean, generally it's like a religious role, or maybe not religious, spiritual. Somebody who, oh God, why do you have to put me on the spot like this? But I mean, if somebody does have a spiritual presence.
Yeah, it's kind of like a witch doctor. It's like a medicine man, right? But it's kind of like in a tribe, the shaman is the spiritual dude, right? And I was just thinking, is Johnny Depp a kind of a shaman? Because he looks like one. He's got these rings. He sort of, and like when you take him into the Pirates of the Caribbean, but just generally, if you take Johnny Depp and you take the roles he's played, he plays this sort of otherworldly fantasy figure. Whether he's in Alice in Wonderland, or he's in Pirates of the Caribbean, or he's in just trying to think. Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, he plays this sort of mythical figure, and so is that the kind of place that is that the kind of place that is occupied in terms of our culture and American culture? Is this sort of this mythical thing, and that's why is this hero and why is such a beloved hero? And then he writes the following: the most unashamed pretender to supernatural powers was the medicine man or shaman. So it's like, does Johnny Depp have is he like a supernatural guy? Is he like a hero, right? And the irony is that Amber Heard was also playing a superhero. She was also playing a kind of shaman, right? But like in the water, this princess of the sea or whatever, Mira, right? But anyway, and so it's, which is the bigger witch doctor? Which is the bigger medicine man, right? Anyway, think about that. The medicine man invented the speciality of entering into the world of the dead and coming back from it unharmed. He went on these supernatural trips and personally carried out whatever business the tribe or members of it had in the powerful world of the spirits. The shaman was the hero who died and was reborn unfailingly. Nothing strikes greater terror into man's heart than to witness an eruption of power from the depths of nature that it cannot understand or control. And so they often in tribes, if someone had epilepsy, they thought this was a medicine man, that when he kind of had these fits, that some kind of spirit was entering into him. And this struck fear into the tribe, but at the same time struck respect into the tribe. Like, we don't know what's going on here, but there's some big juju going on here, and we better and so the shaman would often take advantage of that. So seeing that there was this tremendous fear, you could actually manipulate them with his power in terms of that. And then he goes on to say, in his view, primitive society was from the very beginning a struggle by individuals for special privileges. Who would get the best meat, the easiest access to women, some leisure and security? The elders always tried to arrange these for their own benefit, and so did the shamans. On the simplest level of culture, they were already organizing themselves into an exclusive fraternity so as to get and keep maximum power. How does one get maximum power in a cosmology where ritual is the techniques? Ritual is the technology that manufactures life. Obviously, by getting control of the formulas for the techniques. Now, I can't think of a better description of getting control through using certain formulas on social media, using certain formulas in your YouTube videos. And the formula is quite simple: hate Amber, support Johnny. Very early, the elders and the religious personages try to get control of the ritual. In his brilliant chapter, The Crises of Life and Their Rituals, Radin argues that the religious systematizer built his symbolic interpretations around the crises of life, those passages where one's identity was in doubt, and this was a case where identities were in doubt, where he was moving from one state to another, where everything had to go smoothly in order for the flowering out or birth into new stages to take place. I'm not going to read it all, but he's talking about how to get power through this sort of through a kind of a system of ritual. And that is exactly what social media tried to do out of the Johnny Depp case, was use the Johnny Depp case to get their own personal power. And how you do that is you just say, what is the power struggle going on here? Who's the likely winner going to be? Who's the one with the power here? Well, I want to be on that person's side, and that's going to give me power, right? And then you've got to ask yourself, that may be clever, and it might work, and it might be effective, and all those things. Is it honest? is it honest, and is it truth, and is that justice, doing that? Or is it cynical and opportunistic and other things? What do you think about that?
Opportunistic. That's what I say.
He goes on to say, the frail human creature, and I think a lot of the people on social media are coming from it's almost like, think about the coliseum, and where you're sitting on the coliseum, you kind of a frail Roman with no status, you kind of just somebody, and you're a member of the audience. But through the sort of display that's taking place in front of you, through the drama that's taking place in front of you, you feel connected to the real world. Actually, you're not. You've been disconnected from it, because the gladiatorial combat is a farce. It's an artificial thing, and you, the audience, but it creates its own reality. But nevertheless, within that context, you feel like, wow, I'm important. I'm part of something, because what's happening around you are other people that are all seeing the same thing, and they're all shouting the same thing, and you're part of the same sudden support network. And you feel like, wow, we are all in this together. Actually, you're not. You're just doing the same process of transference, the same projection. But it suddenly feels like you're part of the human race. Actually, you're not. It's just part of the whole theater. Anyway, he goes on to say, the frail human creature tries to change his position from one of insignificance in the face of nature to one of central importance. And so, yeah, you are talking about the Johnny Depp case, and suddenly you are really, really, really important. And you've gotten so many views, and you want to become more important, so you say the views that's going to get you there. Again, you've got to ask the question, is this cynical and opportunistic, and is it truth, or is it something else? So he says, from one of inability to cope with the overwhelming world to one of absolute control and mastery over nature. And the most immediate way to do this is in one's immediate social situation, vis-a-vis others. In other words, the most immediate way to gain control and power is in your social situation. What does that mean today on social media? How do you gain control on social media? You see where it's all going. And you manipulate based on that. It's not based on what you think is true or right or real. It's based on what society wants. And in the Coliseum, they want blood, they want destruction, they want shock value. What's any of that got to do with truth and justice? And that, I think, exposes the hypocrisy of what we're talking about. Brown also writes here, this is Becker quoting Brown, privilege is prestige, and prestige in its fundamental nature, as the etymology of the word means deception. In other words, privilege and prestige is deception and enchantment. And that, I think, is what this whole case was about. We're being deceived and enchanted by celebrity, simple as that. And social media exploded under the enchantment of a really big celebrity. And as a result of transference, as a result of projection on a massive, massive scale. So that's just some of the stuff that I highlighted that I just thought resonated. The other thing, and this deals with scapegoating, that refers to making justice a matter of triumph over an external enemy. Like, what doesn't make any sense with this case was it was about defamation, and then it ends up being about how much can you protect someone against defamation, and it becomes about humiliating Amber Heard. It's like, did you guys not listen to the brief here? Do you guys know what justice is for? Because you didn't honor it in this case. So he talks about the nature of social evil, saying making justice a matter of triumph over an external enemy. Suddenly Amber Heard became everyone's enemy, the enemy of society, the enemy of the greater good. This was the start of the large-scale scapegoating that has consumed such mountains of lives down through history and continues to do so today, right up to, he talks about Vietnam. And then he quotes someone called Mumford saying, hence the sense of joyful relief that so often has accompanied the outbreak of war popular hatred for the ruling classes was cleverly diverted into a happy occasion to mutilate or kill foreign enemies. Thus, the greater the tensions and the harsher the daily repressions of civilization, the more useful war became as a safety valve. And that really hits the exact nail on the head that you've been talking about, that America's become this very unhappy society, this very fearful society, through COVID and all these other things happening. And so this was a place where you could get a release from all that tension and unhappiness, and take it out on someone. It didn't really matter who, but in this case, it was this particular someone. Does that make sense? You muted.
Sorry, I just said yes. No, it does. It definitely does.
Yeah.
It was what I was saying before. I mean, these people, these celebrities become the embodiment of something else in our lives. Sure, they've got a vested interest in, a celebrity that they care about, look up to, worship, whatever. But really at the end of the day, I mean, does anyone really love Johnny that much personally? Does anybody really hate Amber that much personally? They don't even know them. They have no true connection to their life beyond the connection that they perceive in their head.
I saw a lot of people outside the court that seem to think, like those fans that you get, those fans that are like, he looked at me, you know what I mean?
But that's where we are in our sense of reality in this world. I mean, I think there's a lot of people living in a fantasy.
Yeah.
And social media perpetuates that. It keeps you in that fantasy. It keeps you angry. It keeps you wherever you are in life. I mean, it keeps you in that space, and you're allowing yourself to stay in that space.
Yeah.
I can't.
Someone asked in chat.
My days these days, like I literally look at like dog videos on Instagram. That's like the amount that I can handle in my brain, because I am so fed up with all of it and so put off by all of it. I won't go to Twitter anymore. I won't look at any of that stuff anymore, because I literally feel myself being manipulated. The second I put one foot in the door, I feel the manipulation, and I don't want to exist in that space.
There were quite a few people who were disgusted when you said you didn't actually watch the trial. I mean, you watched a little bit of it here and there.
Sure.
Whereas I actually felt the opposite. I felt like I didn't want to watch the trial. I kind of got sucked into it because I was like, where's my, like, I would be just doing my regular work, and I was like, where's everyone gone? Right. And I mean, my job is to cover high-profile cases. I didn't really feel like this qualifies in terms of true crime, so it's not criminal law. But in terms of high-profile, it definitely does qualify.
And by the way, it's a fair, that's fair. Like, I don't mind that like people would be frustrated that I'm sitting here having a conversation with you that's centered on this case, and I haven't watched this case. I totally get that, because you know what, I would be critical of somebody else doing the same thing. That is why I did say, very early on and throughout, full disclaimer, I'm not here to talk about the case. I said this to you before we hopped on too. I'm not going to talk about the case. I'm not qualified to talk about it. And really and truly, that's not what my interest is. I'm talking about everything else I'm observing on the periphery.
I mean, that was
so I get it.
That was my point, was that I want to talk about what this case represents. And, like when you said, this is the poster child for what's happening to America right now, and also greater society. This case is emblematic of what is happening to us as society. And that definitely is worrying. And that's what I wanted to talk about. People still want to be Team Johnny, Team Amber, and hate and whatever. I'm kind of like more worried about, do you see what is happening? Something that I say, whenever there's a mass shooting, to me, the key word is humiliation. The mass shooter has somehow felt personally humiliated by something. His self-esteem is brought down so low that he's got to take drastic measures, right? And it's never brought up. Whenever there is a mass shooting, they always say the same thing. We don't know what the motive is. The motive is always the same thing. Someone has felt utterly humiliated, rightly or wrongly, and then they've taken matters into their own hands. Now, if you could give this message to America, if you could have an FBI guy, not that long ago, there was a particular case, and a guy from the FBI came on, and he'd been studying this for 30 years, and he was like, we still don't know why it's taking place. And I was like, anyway, and I was just like, if you could kind of get somebody out there who could say, it's because people feel humiliated, and there's a sense of insignificance that follows from that, right? And so the cure is you need societies that take care of one another, that are less capricious towards one another. Yeah, you've just seen with Depp versus Heard, humiliation on a nuclear scale, right? And so it's just like you're not getting the memo, and this is going to lead to more. It leads to more and more divisiveness, which also leads to more and more humiliation, which leads to more and more people feeling excluded, and society becoming more and more antisocial. It's literally like a classroom in high school, or just high school itself. The more that somebody decides we cool and you not, and we're going to humiliate you, the less that the overall warm and fuzziness of the class is going to be preserved. But to the extent that you kind of go, we cool and you not, well, the cool guys are going to have a nice time, but somebody else isn't. And then that guy's going to circle back later on and spoil the party. That's how life works. It's called karma, right? And if you kind of insist on saying, you a jerk and you stupid, well, I don't know, just so that's how it's going to be. That negative stuff's going to circle back to you and hit you. And if you can't kind of take responsibility for that, then keep moaning about it and crying, I don't know why this is happening, and it's going to keep happening. I'm just saying what's happening in Depp versus Heard kind of reflects pretty badly on where you say, are you able to tell who someone really is? I don't think so. Are you able to look beyond your own projection and transference? For the most part, no. Are you able to tell what's going on in the world? No. Do you know basically what's going on? In other words, reality. Can you tell what is actually going on? No. In other words,
yeah, people will see it through what's filtered on their feeds.
You're seeing what you want to see.
Directing to them. Exactly.
Yeah, you're seeing what you want to see, and if everyone continues to see what you want to see, we are all headed for freaking disaster. We are all headed for freaking disaster.
Well, if that is literally the world you live in, and that's the only place that you get your information, you are in danger. Every one of us is. And that's kind of, again, why I'm saying I have to disconnect from it. I no longer want to live in that space where I'm constantly in these social media bubbles, because I recognize, I feel the manipulation. I see it happening. I can't always turn away from it. It's there, but I'm just saying, I have to surround myself with other sources of information, not just fall down that trap. I laugh, and there's times when I told you I was kind of signed up somehow for a newsletter that didn't pertain to me. And, and you kind of get a glimpse at somebody else's reality, and you're like, shit, man, we are living on multiple planets in this one country. Yeah. It really feels that way, and empathy goes a long way. And when you're in that, empathy really does. And it's not to say that I think sometimes people confuse empathy with saying let's not be hard on crime, or let's not try to change the things that are broken and wrong and dangerous. It's just, it just literally just these acts of empathy, I just think could have a radical difference. It's kind of let's all take a self-check. Let's all be a little bit more self-aware. Let's be take a self-check of where we are, where our words are, where our actions are. And if everybody did just a little bit more of that, and also recognize that there are these forces and these things out there that are trying to control us and manipulate us for their own reasons, for their own financial benefit. We haven't talked a lot about money during the course of these couple of hours, which is actually kind of shocking, but also hand in hand with all of this is money. All of this stuff is just massive money making on every scale, and there's every reason to manipulate people. So I don't know. I just wish that for the world. I wish we could all take a deep breath, take a step back, and by interjecting ourselves into these cases that like are so like salacious and hateful, it doesn't help. Like we're just like getting ourselves further into this ditch, you know?
Yeah. Oh, Stephanie's just joined us. Stephanie's son just turned 10 years old. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Hope it was a good 10. Like when you're 10 years old, 10 is a big deal. You've hit the double figures, you know, it's your first decade of life. So I hope you had a good birthday party. Yeah, Kathy says, let's start with not calling her a turd. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think, Diane, I think you 100% that PR played a big role in all of this. And PR, you know, if you look at Bell Pottinger, PR today isn't like press releases and mainstream media. PR now is social media. PR is now all about setting up social media bots and all that. And I don't know, what shocked me with this case, and I've said this to Lisa before, is in my experience, thanks a lot, Choice. I think it's the one and only super chat we got, Lisa. 10 New Zealand dollars. Someone from New Zealand appreciated us today, but that's okay. That's okay. I really had a meaningful chat with you when we spoke, and I thought I want to share this with our community. Again, it's like what is the social media shitstorm telling us about ourselves? It's not really so much about Johnny Depp or Amber Heard or anything about that. It's like, jeepers, where's our world going? And it's really just saying, let's be a bit mindful. I don't know whether we can stop where all of this is going, but at least if you know, you're forewarned, kind of thing. And, you know, anyone that is, any person that's enlightened is an asset to the whole world. You know, like just one person that is sort of enlightened makes the world a less dark place. That's really where I'm coming from. Well, thanks a lot, Lucy and Sharon. Well, Sharon, so far Lucy's our first American supporter in Super Chat, but thanks for that. And Sharon, you've done a great job as a mod, keeping things. I saw there was a little bit of nastiness coming up. Thanks a lot for keeping things sort of clean. Yeah, so just in the chat that we had, and you when you spoke about COVID and just the way that Americans are feeling so frustrated, but I don't know, just the way you said it, they need like a release, and this is what this case did. But it's not right. Find another way of getting a release. Go for a jog. Have a cup of coffee with someone. Don't hate on somebody on social media. Like, there should be a better, more constructive way of getting rid of your frustrations. You know?
We've all, I mean, all of us and myself, I mean, collectively, we've all like kind of drowned in our TV viewing and, you know, online time. Like,
thanks,
oh my
Susan.
God, when was the last time you looked at how many hours a day you spend on your iPhone? You know how they have that wonderful stat.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty scary. It's actually terrifying. So, yeah, no, I mean, I mean, speaking from my own personal experience, like you know, when we were kind of like in the depths of COVID, I mean, of course you're inside, so you're sitting there, you know, watching TV, and you're disconnected physically and emotionally from the people that you love, and you're sitting here just watching these numbers on a screen, and, you know, hearing about people sick and dying, and you know, people losing jobs and homes, and you know, I mean, it's like this constant negativity that's just over and over and over again, and it drills into your brain, and it literally, I mean, you feel that toxicity, and you know, and I think all of us felt like, God, I can't wait until this is over. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be so great when we can all kind of enter the world again. And
thanks, Margaret.
there were some, quite a few people that said, just be careful because there's going to be some COVID fallout. This is something else that Cotton Star would talk about. He's like, just wait, there's going to be a lot of crime. There's going to be a lot of shit in the world. Brace yourself. It's not going to be good. And sure enough, like I'm sure a lot of people I know they all have their own personal experiences, coming out of COVID with their work and their personal lives and all sorts of stuff. And I would venture to say, and I'm not talking about for those that got sick and unfortunately, lost loved ones. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this, like the social ramifications of people's lives. I think in a lot of ways, the fallout is worse because to some extent, when you're in that bubble, you're safe. You're still safe in the bubble. Nobody can get you in your home, right? Like, so like you're in your head and everything's festering. But like going out into the world again, now you have all these anxieties inside of you, but you're forced to go out in the world again. You're forced to talk to people again who you've learned have very different ideas than you do. Is terrifying. I mean, really, for the first time in my adult life, I found myself in situations where I would have conversations with people and like 2 minutes in my mind, I'm like, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. I don't want to be here. I'm uncomfortable. And I'm, me, like I'm very social.
Your tolerance level, because of your anxiety level, is diminished,
Absolutely.
But I can tell you, Lisa,
but it's feeling of not being safe. That's the other pervasive thing that's going on in our speaking about America, like there's just this feeling, not feeling safe at all. And like, that's a very frantic feeling. And so, again, people are just trying to find ways to deal with that.
Yeah. I don't know if I told you this, but, I wrote like a machine for about 8 or 9 years. And when I was about to come out of that process, it was like, I'm coming to America. I've written 100 books. I'm gonna come to America. I'm gonna travel to America. And then COVID happened. They were like, the world has been locked down. You can't go anywhere. Mm-hmm. So like I'd written 70 books and I'd written 80 books, 90. And I was like, when I get to 100, I'm gonna like travel internationally. I'm gonna kind of have this big trip celebrating what I've done. And then it was like, somebody up there was like, actually, no, the world's not ready for you. Please stay at home, and you can't see anyone, and no one can come see you, and you can't see anyone. The world has been locked down. And thanks a lot, Stephanie. Stephanie says, the books you've written together are among my favorites. It's a pleasure to hear you speak live. That's to you, Lisa. Unfortunately, I missed most, but I look forward to watching the replay.
Thank you.
Lisa, I don't know if you know Stephanie, but Stephanie's been like almost like my right hand, not man, but person. And no, she's just been, she's like a super mod, and she's done a lot of research. She went to CrimeCon, and she got to know me through reading a lot of my books. And so she's obviously, the fact that she's read our books means she's kind of knows you in a way. It just doesn't know you this way that much. So
very cool. Well,
she's from Connecticut.
Really? Okay, she's good people.
Yeah. Hey, so Stephanie, I don't know if you know Lisa's. Yeah.
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
No, well, I just want to say Lisa's also from Connecticut, and Lisa, I think you were there when Sandy Hook happened, right?
No, I was living out here at the time. My mom still lived there.
Your mom still lived there, yeah.
Very close, yeah. Unfortunately, it's very near and dear to my heart. And, Uvalde just, opened a gaping wound, and it's very hard to accept that this is still going on. Yeah, it's bad. It's really bad.
Did you say your brother was first responder?
Not my brother, my cousin. My cousin actually is a police officer in Connecticut, and he was one of the first responders there. And he, to this day, he just won't talk to the family about it. He said, basically came home and said, I'm never going to talk to you guys about this,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone says, what's
Stephanie
the last?
something.
I'll give you a moment in a second. So
okay.
Mimi says, what's the last name of this guest? It's Lisa Wilson. She's also got a blog, Juror 13. I don't know if you want to put a link to that in chat, Lisa.
Okay.
Yeah, but
I haven't updated
she's done some really interesting. She's done some really interesting research on the John Benet Ramsey case, and yeah, also co-wrote some of our books on the John Benet Ramsey case, which is. I remember when Lisa and I, so we wrote about Oscar Pistorius, then Jodi Arias. I remember when we sort of went into John Benet Ramsey, I was like really like, okay, if I don't know what I'm talking about, this is where it's going to come. This is where it's going to be exposed. Because I was like, this is a big case. There have been hundreds of experts. I'm scared. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I should be doing this. And then Lisa and I had this incredible journey into that case where we found out so many things. And in a weird way, Lisa went off in a direction and found all sorts of things out. And to some extent, I went off in another direction. I don't know if you know about the last photo with the bow in the hair. Do you know about that?
Of course, yeah. Yep. So
I wrote a whole book based on that, the fact that she probably didn't go to bed because she would have taken the bow out of her hair, because she was a pageant child kind of thing. But just whether that's true or not, just taking that into the whole fabric of the case. And so that was, I think Christmas Star is one of my best books and best analysis. And it's a very narrow area as well. So
yeah, it's one of those cases. I know there's so much information that has come out over the course of time that as a researcher, as an investigator, an analyzer, whatever, you have all of this information at your disposal to really pick apart and analyze. So we, over the course of the time from, when we were writing and then after, when you were doing your own thing, I'm doing my own thing, there still continues to be things that, that do come out. But, I wanted to ask Stephanie if she had watched the presentation by John Ramsey and Paula Woodward while she was at CrimeCon. So this was something else I was thinking about too, when we were like, talking about just, kind of like how conspiracy theories are like today and people's mistrust of police and stuff like that, whatever. I'm calling out again. Sorry. I know we've just had a lot of recent conversations about these things, but he is absolutely a Ramsey expert.
Do you see Stephanie's response?
No, I haven't seen it yet. Let's see. Where is she? I don't see it yet. Nick and I did a show on it here.
And she says, "Oh yes, I did."
Oh, okay, got it. All right. So, what I want to say, and then I'm curious to hear what you have to say about this too. But so my point that I was going to say, so Cotton Star, who's absolutely an expert on this case, knows everything about it. Basically, has recently said he's like, as it relates to true crime, he's like, I feel like the conspiracy theories of like true crime are now like more mainstream than mainstream is conspiracy theory. So for instance, like, let's talk about the Ramsey case. Like for many years, rightfully so, people thought that, the parents were suspicious, that the Ramsey family had something to do with this crime. And that's not just a feeling or a thought. I mean, there's quite a bit of information out there that leads you down that path, right? But over the course of time and through a lot of work with the media and a lot of books and some carefully crafted presentations, John and Paula Woodward and people that are on Team Ramsey have kind of shifted that. And it's turned to, Boulder police, completely screw this investigation. They will not research the DNA. They won't do anything with the DNA. They're preventing this case from being solved. It's all about, police mistrust. The government has failed us in every respect on this case. And I think like the title of their presentation was, dispelling the myths of this case. And that's what they were there to do. And you know what? Like the crowd, from what I watched online, they all clapped and cheered and felt bad for John Ramsey. It's as if they completely erased any of like the actual information that people should really be looking at that talks about you know, why this family is suspect. And so that shift has taken place, and you see that in other cases too. So I don't know, it's just, it is an interesting shift as conspiracy theory and mistrust and all these things are happening on social media. You start to see like the landscape of how people view crime, and in particular popular crimes that we're talking about, how their perceptions can be changed by a good
Lisa, you
PR
should
campaign.
I'll send you the link at some point to CrimeCon 1, which is where Stephanie is actually on. It's like a StreamYard thing like this, which Stephanie talks about it. And she says she was in that audience and she felt so outnumbered. She was like, everyone, and it was almost like if you shake your head, someone's going to slap you on the back of the head, like, what are you doing? And and you know, there's also like a kind of a cult overtone. So we kind of in a world now where it's like, and part of this is fueled by social media, where conspiracies are now the new truth, and so if you are a rationally minded person, you are being pushed to the minority, and you are now, I guess, a weird kind of revolutionary. You're kind of like Neo in the Matrix. You're like this weird person moving in a different world, but the real world carries on without you. And I find that terrifying, to be honest. And I've done a lot of work trying to push back on, you know, in all the true crime cases we do, and we did, whether it's Oscar Pistorius, Amanda Knox, Jodi Arias, even O.J. Simpson, there's always like the authentic narrative, what likely happened, even Casey Anthony. And then there's this like counter narrative that sort of doesn't make sense, but it's sort of the counter narrative. I call it the inauthentic narrative. Now it's almost like all of those inauthentic narratives are now the actual narrative. And it's like, how did that happen? And the answer is, and that's why I've kind of been trying to impress it on my channel more and more. We need to think critically. We need to think for ourselves. We can't be part of a cloud of social media that just goes like everybody else. You've got to think critically. And people seem to find it quite hard to actually think. And so they join teams, and they're part of, and I don't know if you remember this, we would always say, we are led by the evidence. We're not part of this team or that team. Even when we covered Oscar Pistorius, it was like, I'm not Team Reaver, even though Reaver was a friend, even though we knew Reaver and we loved Reaver. Which is like, we want to know what happened here. We're not Team Reaver. We're also not Team Oscar. We are trying to be like judges and jurors examining the evidence, and that's something that is sorely lacking in the world today, where it's like, I don't care what the evidence is. I don't care what the facts are. I care that most people think this, and I care that it resonates with me, and so I believe it. And belief is the new fact.
You know what I thought, like I actually always appreciated, and I thought was kind of cool about like the process of like some of like the earlier stuff that we worked on was like, I came into this, some of those cases, like, and we're writing simultaneously, not knowing the true details of the case, like only having a public perception of what I thought about that case. Like, you know, I always had a suspicion about Patsy Ramsey, and that's how I started Craven Silence with you. And I even say that in the book. And so the whole point of like doing, you know, the whole point isn't to write, you know, 400 books on the same case. It's kind of like to take the reader on this journey with you of like, okay, let's actually like see where we start and then see where we end up. Like, let's do a real investigation, real research on this. And I mean, I guess it's kind of the written form of like doing a podcast series as you're investigating. And, you know, and we changed tremendously over the course of time. And, you know, about how we felt about a lot of different things. So I thought that was kind of a cool and fun way to like, you know, go about some of these cases.
That is so true. Stephanie says it very well. Theories evolve. And I remember coming across something on Reddit where someone accused us of like cynically, like you know all the information and you put out a book, but you actually know what's going on, and then you put out another book and you're kind of teasing the audience. You're trying to suck as much out of the case that you can. What they don't realize is the way that we investigated, every time you do like a flyover, you get a layer of knowledge of the case, and then you cover it again, and that layer goes deeper. And it's not like you just look at it once and you've got like okay, we can make 14 books out of this. Not like that at all. In the beginning, you usually start with, I want to write one book, and then it's like, wow, I've just realized that maybe I was wrong about that, and I didn't know about that, and that needs more emphasis. That becomes the second book, right? And people seem to think that it's just like, oh, this is all by design. You knew the outcome from the beginning. What was quite interesting with us was, like, there were a couple of cases where we disagreed, where you thought something and I thought something else. In the John Benet Ramsey case, I think I started with John. I thought John was guilty. Then I thought it was Patsy. And then you move on from there. And it seems like a natural evolution. And sometimes you like go, someone says, I think John did it. And you're like, oh, you must be new to the case. You know, like.
But you know what's always a really interesting thing is when you are working as a team with somebody on a case, and so you're starting at a certain place and you're investigating, and then you come to that point where you know, in your heart, you know, it's not to say that you know for sure, obviously, but you know what you believe happened, and we did, and it's kind of, and once you're there. You're there. And yes, and it evolves, you know, the story's always going to evolve because you weren't there, you didn't see it. But with the more information you get, the more those things evolve. It's like, wow. So that was, you know, I think somebody in the chat just asked what I think happened. I don't know if we want to go into that right now. Let's not do that.
Let's not do that.
Teresa, you can send me an email or a DM or whatever, and I can talk to you about it.
Teresa, I think you should go into Lisa's blog, and you'll quickly see where those posts go. So, some of them are really pretty well done. I just want to welcome Bruce, who's just become a newest member. Good to be here. Thanks for joining us. I can't wait to do the next Van Gogh episode 12. It's really going somewhere. I think the difference when, like, I never really wanted to become a YouTuber. In fact, when YouTube kind of happened, people were like, you must go on YouTube. And I was like, when you write and you research, the time it takes to form a narrative takes so long that the richness of your narrative, the richness of your research, the in-depthness is so deep that I didn't really want to give that up. I was like, when you make a narrative and everything's got to fit together, you've got to work so hard to, like, you might be saying, what is the weather? What is the moon phase or whatever? Because you're trying to tell a story, you've got to find all these answers. And so the detail that you've kind of figured out in the end is so comprehensive, so omniscient, that it's really very rich and worth so much. And when you go on YouTube, the turnaround time is so quick. And as a result, your analysis is so superficial. Even if you're a great researcher with great attention to detail, it makes you a superficial investigator. And I didn't really want to go that way. One of the big lessons from someone who writes books about crimes or whatever is that you spend a lot of time being curious. A lot of the time you are investigating. A lot of the time what you are doing is you're going, what happened here, and trying to get information. And when you write a book, it's all about gathering information, and that takes a period of weeks to gather all that information. And then you finally publish it after weeks, whereas a YouTube video, someone's thought about it for a few seconds or a few minutes, and it goes up the same day. And when you write books, you've got to think about what you're thinking about. You've got to think whether it's cohesive and all that. But the main thrust of it is, and in order to be an effective story writer and storyteller, I also had to push myself back over and over again and say, you don't know all the answers. The answers are out there. You don't actually know what they are. Be curious. And you kind of had to keep saying to yourself, not, I know this, I know that, I'm sure about this, I'm that. You had to keep saying to yourself, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe there's more to it. In other words, you had to be really humble. And then that is when the answers came. Not when you absolutely knew what you knew. It was when you said, I don't know. And the thing that I found so vulgar and so horrible about Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard was this absolute certainty, even before Amber Heard had testified at what had happened. People making these snap judgments just like this over and over and over again. And the creators making these judgments and then the audience cottoning onto them and gleefully joining in. It's like, let's all make snap judgments as quickly as we can. And you know what? How court cases work is somebody makes an argument and you listen and you don't make a judgment, you keep an open mind. Someone else then makes an argument and you don't make a judgment, you keep an open mind. And guess what? At the end of 6 weeks, you then make a judgment. Whereas on YouTube, every single day, people were making judgments moment to moment, minute to minute, day by day, constantly, just never ending. And it was the same judgment all over again. Amber is a liar, Amber is a liar, Amber is a liar. That was it. And they couldn't get enough of it. Just like, okay, you made your point. No, it's not enough. We need to make an even bigger point. That is what is so wrong. And I don't know how you reverse this. Maybe if Elon Musk had to buy Twitter, he could say, okay, let's try and teach people to think more critically. I don't know. We'll see.
You have a lot more. Yeah, no, I don't. I see.
I don't know whether Elon Musk's thought process was, I want to buy Twitter so that I can control President Trump. In other words, President Trump, do you want to be president? Okay, if you do, I can fix the switch. So will you support me on this project? Yeah. Okay, well, I'm flicking the switch. Okay, here we go.
All kidding aside, and this is literally like another hours worth of broadcast, so we won't get into it, but it is a huge conversation about who should be allowed to own and control social media. I mean, that's a whole other think tank discussion. That's scary.
Yeah. Bruce T, that's a great point. He says, a fixed position doesn't react to evidence, it's irrelevant, or it should be. That's another thing that also, when you writing books and your position's evolving and it's fluid, then you are open to new information. You can say, either I made a mistake or this new information changes things or whatever. But when you have like a fixed position and you're rigid about it and you're judgmental about it, you F up your ability. There's that saying, you can't fill up a glass that's already full. That's what you have when you've made up your mind. Well, no more information is going to matter. And there are a lot of people who early on decided, I'm this team. And so it doesn't matter what happens after that. It all just gets dismissed because it's not part of my whatever bias or framework or team. That's a very dangerous person to be around. To quote Voltaire again, if you believe in absurdities, you're capable of atrocities. Mm-hmm. That's where we are, believing in absurdities. I don't care about evidence. I care about how I feel about what I feel about. Mm-hmm. So it all becomes emotional.
Absolutely, yeah.
Ernest Becker said, if we don't have the omnipotence of gods, we can at least destroy like gods. That's exactly, that is the Depp versus Heard case in a nutshell from the perspective of social media. I don't have the omnipotence of these celebrities, but I can destroy like a god. I can destroy this person like this other celebrity whose side I'm on wants to. I'm going to join him in this. He wants global annihilation or global humiliation. I'm going to help him achieve it. By belonging to a huge group or mob, you feel omnipotent, powerful, larger than life, significant, godlike. This is especially necessary when looking on from our obscure seats as spectators. A lot of people on social media are like just spectating. From the littleness into the vast canvas of life and the excess these celebrities are living, we look on into that and we feel like, wow, look where they had their wedding, look where they had their honeymoon, look where they live. My life is so small, but by getting onto this sort of team, I can now participate somehow. And if we can join with the greater of these celebrities, we can partake in their excess too, their transcendence over littleness and little people who impede them. Yeah, so what do you think of that, Lisa?
I think I'm getting tired.
Is it? Okay, well, you know, where I am, it's almost 4 o'clock in the morning. So to touch on what you said earlier on about COVID and everything, do you know, Ernest Becker spoke about terror management theory. That's what he called it. And he said, the terror of absolute annihilation creates such a profound anxiety in people. And think about the terror of COVID, what people were worrying about with that, but also the terror of America being split apart, also the terror of what's happening in Europe, also the financial terror that's overtaking some people. It creates a profound, or albeit subconscious, anxiety in people that they spend their lives trying to make sense of it. And that is in a way kind of what we are doing here, is we're trying to make sense of the way folks try to make sense of their terror by being drawn into this Depp versus Heard thing. And it's a way to control your anxiety. You're escaping from the drama of your life into the drama of somebody else's life. It's not the best way to deal with.
No. Well, and to take it a step further than that, and this is something actually we've talked about quite a bit, like over the years, is people see crime through like the lens of their own trauma and their own victimhood. And you know, that's surely true. And you know, a lot of people watch true crime nowadays. And so I completely lost my train of thought. But yeah, I mean, like, so you're like, what you're seeing, like, literally is like, it's a reflection of how you feel about the world, right? And so when you're taking like all of these people that are so like broken, and you know what I mean, like they're in this place of like fear, it's like it becomes about that. It's not really about like the case. They may think it is, and there may be elements of that case that truly do interest them. But I think if they were actually really truthful with themselves, they would recognize why they're drawn to something. We're all drawn to certain cases and certain stories, and you know what I mean? There's something, like, if you really think about it long and hard enough, I don't think it's just simply that you're bored and you have nothing to watch and you want to, you know, watch, you know, for whatever salacious reasons, like two people, you know, go back and forth at each other. It actually really isn't that. There's something there that's satisfying for you. And whether you realize it or not, it's tapping into your inner trauma.
Yeah. For me, one of the most profound things I learned while writing about true crime, while researching true crime, I mean, true crime ultimately led me to this guy, Ernest Becker. And what I figured out through reading all of these books, you know, this one as well and this one as well, is it's so fundamental and so obvious that it's ridiculous. And it's the question of, how do you deal with your anxiety? And it's the question that you ask yourself. It's the question you ask somebody else. It's a question you ask when you're investigating a crime. It's a question you ask like your countrymen, your nation, your politician, your whatever. But it's basically a universal question. And it's quite a difficult question to answer. What is the best way to deal with your anxiety? And right, but nevertheless, it's something that you should ask of yourself and ask of others. So ask of someone on social media. The people following Depp versus Heard, or I think people struggling with anxiety, and yeah, you have a situation of what is the actual answer here? I don't actually have if I wait with my answer, that's going to actually make me more anxious. So I'm going to know the outcome immediately. I'm going to know right now, he's right, she's wrong, she's evil, he's good, and now my anxiety is sorted out because I've now exerted control over that. And where there's great uncertainty, there's great anxiety. Where there's great like about anything, if you're uncertain about love, uncertain about money, uncertain about your job, uncertain about the future, there's anxiety. So what's the antidote to that? Certainty. And that's what a lot of creators on YouTube offer you. They say, I have the answer. I know what I have this, I have that, and they don't. Very few people do. I have the truth, whatever, and they don't. But what it does is it satiates that anxiety. Certainty satiates that anxiety, but certainty is so often a myth. And that's why truth and authenticity is something that evolves, and you've got to be patient with it. And right now in the Van Gogh letters, we're going through years and years of letters from Vincent van Gogh. And what comes out of that is, wow, he's actually quite a complex person. Who knew? Well, guess what? Just like you, he's a complex person. Just like me, he's a complex person. And so you're only going to get to know this person when you spend a lot of time getting to know them. And obviously, that's another way of learning to control anxieties, where you start to this feeling of, I need the answer right now. I need certainty about this question that's quite important right now. No. Try and be patient with it. Try and learn patience. Try and learn to, and then that learns a deeper level of resilience, a deeper level of control of anxiety. Do you know what I'm saying? It's not the superficial, like ching ching. It's now a much more authentic way of addressing something, right? And so I think this case, the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard case, shows just this absolute failure, this abject failure to do that, where everything is reduced instantly to a soundbite, and then everyone jumps onto that soundbite and kind of celebrates. Like, I've gotten satisfaction in this, and now I know what this is about, and it's great. But it is all a little bit, it's like you're a little bit of a fairy tale there. It's not really real, but that doesn't matter. I feel good. It does matter, because at the other end of a fairy tale lies a nightmare. And that fairy tale of everyone being Team Johnny, where it just feels so good and so reinforcing, is a nightmare for somebody else, and that's not right. It's not fair, it's not just, it's not right, you know. In a case that's about protecting someone from humiliation and defamation, whether you want to say it's protecting Johnny or Amber, you can't jump in there and violate those protections and defame. But that's exactly what people did do. And that hypocrisy is just not even seen. It's in the thrill of the mob looking out into the gladiator arena and saying, oh, that was fun, that was exciting. Unless it's you. And if it's you there, it's not so fun or exciting. I can tell you
There's
that.
quite a few people I would see online basically saying, can't wait to get out of work so I can, go home and get my fix, get my, Heard Depp fix. And, and it literally is a drug.
Yeah. Okay, Lisa, you said I don't want to do much more than an hour. We're approaching 3 hours.
I know, I'm tired. You're playing with my
you've had
anxiety.
a long week, eh? You had a long week.
Yeah, this is the end of my week. Yes, it is.
Okay, I'm going to just end off. I thought I was going to leave this out, but I'm going to touch on it just very quickly. I want to talk about Asian culture. One of the jurors, at least one of them, was Asian. In fact, am I right or wrong that there's only one white person on the jury? Am I right or wrong in that? I don't know I know there were 2 white jurors. I think a second one may have been an alternate, but as far as I know, there's only one white person on the jury. Terry Dean says, much of my own research comes from my preferred YouTube creators, and TCRS is the best. Mainstream doesn't invest themselves personally in stories. And she says, thanks, Lisa. Yeah.
Thank you guys. Honestly, this is fun. This was really cool.
Choi says Lisa looks great even though she's tired. Lisa, I'm almost done with this, but I just want to talk about.
Thank you.
This guy that has gone onto TikTok says he's Asian. I think he's the juror who sat closest to Amber Heard. I'm not 100% sure, but apparently when Amber looked at him, it made him uncomfortable, and eventually was like, please stop looking at me. And he was kind of like, I'm just going to fold my arms and listen. I'm not going to stop looking at me, kind of thing. You know, that just, and so he's already closed himself off in that sense. Anyway, you've got to think about who decided that these jurors would be the best for the outcome that they wanted. And I've got a feeling that because Johnny Depp's team were so well paid, experts in libel law, that they did their research. Lisa, do you want to talk a little bit about Jose Baez and the research he did on social media? You want to talk about that quickly?
Yeah, social media is absolutely huge in terms of like the research that prosecutors and defense attorneys do in case preparation. So they do it first of all for their jury selection. If you know, when you're like sitting in a courtroom, they are checking you out online. that actually is a real thing that's taking place. They're going to research the crap out of you to make sure, you know, like picking your jury is probably the most important thing that you're going to do for your case. And so, you know, they have crafted that ability to do that. But then, you know, as far as like your strategy in your case, and Jose Baez talks about this in, you know, the books and interviews and stuff he did after the interview or after the Casey Anthony trial. They had a whole team of people that would be online every single day, just trolling all of the sites. I don't know if trolling is the right word, but literally trolling the sites. You know, whether it's web sleuths or you know, Digital Spy or, you know, Reddit, all these different sites where people are talking about the case and gathering what everybody's saying about it. And they collected all of this data to figure out where do we have the best opportunity to introduce doubt in this case. And it was determined that people hated Casey Anthony's parents, Cindy and George, that they were confused by them. They didn't like the fact that, you know, on one day, Cindy Anthony is calling 911 and saying there, you know, smells like there was a dead body in the trunk. The next day she's doing an interview saying, no. Yeah, like she was contradictions all across the board. They hated that. They hated her. They specifically hated George, which was really interesting research, but they could pinpoint that, you know, the grand majority of people didn't like George. They didn't understand George. And so you can see during the trial, George was absolutely skewered. He was accused of sexually abusing Casey. Even her brother was abused or accused of sexually, you know, violating Casey. But George in particular, not only was he accused of doing that to her, he was accused of being there when Kaylee supposedly drowned. That was their story. And that he was the one that said to Casey, don't you worry, you go do your thing. I'm going to take care of this. I'll get rid of the body. And so without saying it directly, basically insinuating he's the one that like dumped her down the street in the swamp. They pinned everything on him. And sure enough, what happened, she was acquitted. But, you know, so there was somebody in your chat yesterday. I just want to say this. There was somebody in your chat yesterday who was asking about like, you know, well, you know, what do you think about like the other evidence that was introduced, you know, like stuff about the autopsy? There were some question marks like about, you know, did they investigate the skull properly? There was all of that, like tons of weeks of testimony about smells in the trunk, chloroform, you know, stuff like that can really confuse a jury. They're trying to wade through the science and figure out like, I don't know, is this real? Is it not? But honestly, at the end of the day, what mattered the most is exactly what Jose and his team zeroed in on, is that nobody liked George. And so all of this skewering of George at trial ultimately allowed the jury to come to their conclusion that they could not figure out who did what. They knew somebody in the Anthony family killed her.
Yeah.
Because, you know, she was found with items from the house. I mean, it was given that somebody in the family killed her, but they couldn't say for sure that it was 100% Casey. It won their case for them. So that kind of research on social media during and throughout a case happens all the time, and it absolutely helps lawyers win cases. There's no question.
Yeah. So I want to come back to Asian culture. Someone says, I'm not Asian, but I think Asian culture is similar. I don't know, do you mean, I know in New Zealand, are you Maori, or I'm not sure what you mean by that, but we're going to touch on that in a second. But what Lisa's actually saying is that when Jose Baez was defending Casey Anthony, he basically was like, what defense are we going to use here? And how he came up with that was that he researched basically social media. Obviously, it was different then. It was more like blogs and that kind of thing. And he went on to things like websites and looked at what people were kind of speculating on. In other words, he took what was already in the popular mind space and kind of, in other words, people were naturally gravitating to these thoughts and ideas, and then used that, right? That's how I understand it anyway. That's how I understand what Lisa's saying. In terms of Asian culture, I can tell you that I lived in South Korea for over 4 years, almost 5 years, and it's a very different society to here. It's paternalistic, which means it's male dominated. It's also it's not the same as certain other paternalistic societies. I mean, you don't wear a burqa or whatever, but it nevertheless is a society where you would prefer to have male children, and so that part is so serious. Where when they were having female children, they would have abortions. They would literally, and so if you had a baby and you could have what do you call it? Is it a CAT scan, or what's it called? MRI, or what, when you check the sex of the baby.
And like an ultrasound.
Yeah, an ultrasound. They had to stop doing that because people would be like, "Oh, I'm having a girl." Okay, and it became so bad that there were eventually too few women in the country. In other words, the population was mostly men, and so they had to start literally importing women from other countries because of this cultural thing. Because it's so paternalistic. So if you're a boy born into the family, you're the prince, you're special, right? Now, if you take that thinking into this court case and you say you've got more Asian people, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean, because you get Asian Americans and they are westernized and their thinking is a lot different to people in Asia. But I don't know if you can take that thinking completely out, because you might have a grandfather or whatever, or, that is nevertheless part of that fabric. But what I can tell you from my understanding and from my experience is, when you live in a paternalistic society, a man can do certain things that a woman can't do. A man can drink and get drunk and he can do whatever, but a woman doesn't. A woman stays at home. And it is by its very nature, it's the male figure controlling the female figure. The female figure must be respectful. The male can kind of do whatever he wants to, right? And as I say, that was my experience when I lived in South Korea. And a lot of the divorce rate in South Korea is as high as it is, one of the highest in the world, because the women there are like, I don't really accept this thing that I'm like your sidekick. I want to be equal to you. And then they say, no, this is how our society works. You are. So not only like did they have to import women from other countries, because so many children that are not male get aborted. Even when you have Koreans marrying one another, it's like, well, I don't want to live with your father. So what would often happen is a woman would then marry a man and then go and live with his family. And so now you're not only getting told what to do by your husband, but by his father and also by his mother, because you're like the lowest level on that little equation, right? So you can imagine if that is, whether it's lightly or heavily, that whole cultural apparatus, if that's taken into a trial where you've got a woman who is apparently this or that, you can say, no. What he does is fine no matter what. What she does isn't fine no matter what. Does that make sense? In other words, you're taking that kind of transference directly, that cultural transference directly into this case. You can take it a little bit further as well and say, does Johnny Depp actually look Asian? In other words, so he's got dark eyes or whatever, but could he pass sort of for an Asian? Well, I can tell you now that compared to Amber, absolutely. Amber's got blue eyes and blonde hair. She doesn't pass for an Asian. So if you've got a mostly male jury and a lot of them are Asians, is there going to be some kind of cultural bias one way or the other? What do you think the answer is? And I just wonder whether Amber Heard's counsel, when they were agreeing to certain jury members, whether they even considered that. That's the one side of it. So in other words, sexism and the paternal aspect, right? The other aspect is attitudes to substance abuse, right? As I said, I lived in South Korea and I experienced, I was there when it was the 2002 Soccer World Cup. So I was there when there was a lot of excess and a lot of partying and a lot of all that, a lot of revelry. There's a article in, I think it's NBC News, and it says, and it basically says, you can't think of Asians as a group. You've got to see them as subgroups and understand them that way. And they say Japanese Americans have got the highest rate of binge drinking. That's 13.1%. And Chinese Americans have got the lowest. So if you were going to have a jury member on and he was a Japanese American, he might say binge drinking is not a big deal. It's part of our culture. Whereas if it was a Chinese American, maybe not so much. Korean Americans have the highest rate of heavy drinking. That's totally different. Mm-hmm. That's where you don't just binge drink, you just drink. And in Korea, there's a drink called soju. I guess it's kind of like whiskey. And they drink that like cool drink. And there's a kind of a culture in Korea, you never have an empty glass. If you at a restaurant or at a table, your glass is never empty. So if you mm-hmm. drink something and also you never fill up your own glass with alcohol. So if you're drinking, somebody else will fill up your glass, like you will drink more. And then you drink that up, okay, I'm going to fill that up. And that just creates a culture of drinking. You can imagine, if you are responsible for filling up with your glass, then when you drink something and then when you're ready, you fill something up. But if everyone around you is like, that guy's glass is empty, fill it up, then you just keep drinking, right? That's just how it's going to work. Japanese American.
Sorry, I just guess. I mean, I get, I understand the point, and I think everybody here understands the point that you're getting at. If people think that these types of things aren't considered when juries are constructed, then they actually they're really fooling themselves. These things absolutely come into play. Race, culture, your male, female, whatever you are, your job. I mean, they ask you, and I think you're going to see this more and more and more, even longer voir dire processes. There's so much they need to know about you to determine if you are the right person to give them the outcome that they want. It's a big job. And honestly, people get paid big money to know what they're doing and picking people and understanding these differences in cultures and races and all of that stuff. It's a big
someone in chat said you can do that in Caucasian culture. Yes, you can drink, but the thing is, you're being judged by certain kinds of Asians, and so it's not just how they feel towards drinking, but it's also how do they feel towards a woman who is doing certain things. So bear in mind, during the Depp Heard trial, you heard a man and a woman shouting at one another. You heard a man and a woman acting weird. Now you kind of got to ask yourself, what kind of person will look at that and go, I don't like what she's doing. You know what I mean?
That is the mindset. That's exactly how they're thinking, how you're going to be thinking. They're getting into the mind of those people.
So I don't know what the answer is. I just know there were a few Asians on the jury. I don't know what the answer is, but I have highlighted here, Korean Americans have got the highest rate of heavy drinking. Korean Americans have also got the highest rate of marijuana use. And so I would imagine if you had a Korean American on the jury, that would help your case if you were wanting Johnny Depp to win. Because you would basically say, this substance abuse isn't necessarily a big deal, but the fact that she is bothers me. I don't really like the fact that she's doing this. Do you know what I'm saying? And then it says Filipino and Vietnamese Americans have both got the highest rate of illicit drug use. And in terms of all of these, what do you call it, tests, Chinese Americans have got the lowest. So Chinese Americans have got the lowest binge drinking, heavy drinking, cigarette smoking, marijuana use, drug use. So I would be surprised if there's a Chinese American on the jurors, but maybe there is. I don't know. I just think it's an interesting aspect to deal with because this is all about, like, people keep saying you biased. Well, guess what? The people who chose this jury wanted a jury that would be biased one way or another. That bias would factor in one way or another. Yeah,
that's true in every single case.
The lawyers are trying to calculate that into the legal calculus, right? Yeah.
That's the strategy. Yeah.
So this particular juror that's come forward, if he is the juror, he's kind of said, I'm now not going to say any more. I feel like I might be jeopardizing the case, and I'm going to sort of put my TikTok channel on standby for a month and then decide. I've been approached by all these news agencies. I think I'd be surprised if he doesn't have a change of heart, meaning I'd be surprised if he doesn't start reading articles and start realizing I feel a little bit different about this now. Or he starts thinking, wow, I didn't really pay much attention to social media, but now I'm seeing social media in a totally different way. Was it fair? Was what's happening to Amber Heard fair? I didn't know this. It wasn't revealed in court. Is that fair? So let me just ask you this. When you were a juror, I think it's just a kind of a simple, obvious question, but you were a juror twice, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Did you think afterwards, did I make the right decision on those two occasions?
Yes. I mean, yeah, I think I knew logically, intellectually, I knew that we made the right decision. I truly did. But, we all have a head and a heart. And my heartstrings, quite frankly, were like, oh shit. What if there is a chance that I didn't? It's the emotional side of me. And you know what I mean? Everybody has that divide. Of course. I mean, the most recent case that I did was, gosh, I'm trying to think, it was 10 years ago. It's 10 years ago because my nephew was born right at the tail end of that trial, and he just had his 10th birthday. So going through it, it was almost a 4-week process from start to finish. And it was an attempted murder trial. And the defendant tried to kill his mother. Excuse me. And so it was a very interesting dynamic that both sides in the courtroom were the same family, and people that were testifying were family members. His teenage son had to testify against him, and he didn't want to. So it was a very emotional trial to watch. And I felt bad for everybody involved. I actually felt really bad for the defendant, even though I knew that, you know what I mean, that like I knew what he had done. it's still, I still, you know, empathetically could look at him as a human being and feel for the position that he was in for a lot of reasons. I won't go into the whole long story now. But yeah, I mean, it was actually really hard. I mean, like literally after making that decision and walking out of the courtroom, just like crying tears for like 2 weeks straight, because I was like, I just completely changed the course of these, you know, people's lives. So anyway, yeah, that's
yeah,
that's what jurors go through. It's not easy, you know, and you've got everybody sitting there in the courtroom staring at you. So yeah, even though you know in your heart you made the right decision, there's also that part of you that's like, oh my God, what if I didn't, you know? Yeah.
So Bruce says, who can come onto a jury without preconceptions and cultural baggage? So what is quite a weird, and I think Lisa, you can also maybe talk about this, what is quite a weird balancing act that the lawyers have got to do is they've got to cancel out sort of some non-negotiables. Like, have you been reading about the trial? So certain obvious biases, but then they also want to dial in some less obvious biases. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, so are you asking about like what you're asked like during voir dire? Like what are the types of questions and stuff? Or sorry.
Yeah. So in a certain way, they want to exclude certain people that are clearly, you know, they've made up their minds one way or the other, right?
Sure.
But then they also want to dial in somebody who can potentially be easily, I don't know.
Oh, absolutely. Swayed.
You know, like, yeah. So it's quite a funny contradiction that you want to get rid of bias, but you also want to keep a little bit if you can. So in other words, it's kind of like playing the legal game where you say, we don't want to have a biased jury, and then the lawyer says, I want a little bit of bias if I can get away with it. You know?
Yeah. Drug abuse was a part of our case, and that was absolutely a thing that they really harped on in the questioning. What kind of, you know, experience did you have with it? What experience within your families? You could tell they definitely wanted people that were empathetic to people with drug issues. But what they really want to weed out, you know, the people that are there for other reasons, you know what I mean? You can always tell the clowns in the class that are there for stupid reasons, whatever, you know what I mean? Or they, you know, somebody who's like just making an idiot out of themselves, or they're not particularly smart, that like, regardless of what their biases may be, you know, this person doesn't have enough brain cells to rub together to actually figure out what the hell is going on here. Like, so yeah, I mean, you can tell by their questions what they're trying to get at. So it is a little bit of a game, and there's no question that there are some very intelligent jurors out there that probably know how to play that game to get onto juries. We actually have a situation right now with Scott Peterson. His case is, you know, he was convicted in 2004 of killing his wife Lacey, and was on death row, and he's now going through an appeal process that it's actually not done. I think at the end of June is when they're going to be doing like the closing arguments in this appeal case. But the whole premise of like why this appeal is being considered is because of a juror being tainted, somebody that they believe lied during voir dire to get herself onto that jury. There's actually quite a few appeals that you're going to see now, and more are going to be jury related.
Yeah. No, I think that's such a great point. And I think the question that now comes out of all of this is what skeletons are going to come out of the closet in terms of this jury, the Depp versus her jury. Are they going to be able to prove anything one way or another? The fact that this one juror has already gone onto TikTok, he wasn't interviewed by a journalist. He came off the jury, and the judge said, you can't, I don't know, I think they said, we're going to withhold their identities from the public for a year, right? And so this guy elected, if it's real, I mean, you can make the argument it's not him, but we're kind of just saying, we're speculating, if it is him, ... If it is him, and he's broken his own silence, remained anonymous, but nevertheless gone on. you know, one of the things he said was, I think there was mutual abuse. I think that Amber instigated it. If that's true, then he's shot their case in the foot already, because he's saying, I do think Johnny did something to her. And that's something that in their appeal, they can actually use and say,
sure,
blah, blah, blah. And I think he got quite a shock when he saw that, and he said, okay, no, I'm not going to say any more. I don't want to jeopardize the case. Well, that's exactly what you've just done. You've just done that.
Yeah, you really do have to be careful of that, because they will absolutely go after juries. That's a big one.
And I think the fact that he went onto TikTok so soon is another big red flag, where you say, was this jury tainted by social media? Well, he went onto TikTok immediately afterwards. And it's the trial by TikTok, not the trial by Twitter, not the trial by YouTube, the trial by TikTok. Where does he go first? TikTok. And you've got to wonder what the heck is going on here. So I do think this aspect, I know people are like, hands off the jury, don't talk about it, don't think about it, they made the right decision. The fact is, there was a social media shitstorm here, and the question is, it's like, to me, it's not really even a question. It's that the social media absolutely had an influence. The question is how much, and what do you do about it? That's really the question. And I guess we'll find out. Lisa, I want to thank you for being here. It's really been great having you. Really good to see you as well. I must also tell you, you've gotten a lot of praise in chat. People saying, can we do a part 2? Stephanie saying, Nick, please let Lisa go. She's tired. Please help her.
I like Stephanie. I think we're going to be friends.
Yeah, no, for sure. So,
you know what? This is so, like, I remember these days of these chats we would do. Have you noticed, like, literally the sun has risen and set in the course of time? Like, you can't even see me anymore on the camera.
Yeah, no, I was like, it is getting dark there. There's darkness and light.
Exactly. We've like gone a whole season since this conversation started.
Yeah, I can tell you where I am. I sometimes do lives, and it's not so much the case now, but because it's winter here, but in summer I'd be doing a live, and I would see the window in front of me go lighter. I'd be like, oh, it's not only the next day, but it's clearly the next day.
Yeah. All right. Next time I'll be sure to put some lights on, because we'll likely be talking late into the night.
Okay, so Lisa, it's been great having you. We want you to come back, but let us know what you have on your heart. Like, if you want to talk about the juror stuff anymore, if you come across Amber Heard related stuff that you want to share with us, let us know. I'll put a link so you can watch Stephanie with the CrimeCon thing.
Yeah, please do.
Didn't you follow the Delphi case?
I not closely, but I mean, yes, I'm very familiar with it, and I'm very interested in any content you have about that.
So if you're interested, Stephanie and I are doing something on Delphi. I think it's tomorrow. If you want to join us, you can. Like, you don't have to be there for the whole thing, but you can maybe jump in if you want to, if you're available.
Yeah. I'm out for the weekend, but let's talk and figure out the next one. Can I pick the next one?
Maybe.
Yeah. No, I'll definitely come back on for sure. We'll figure out what's a good one to do.
Okay. But thanks so much for being here. You're a great guest and very interesting. And it's also just good seeing a friend again. We worked a lot together. Definitely good seeing that. And I just want to thank the mods who are in, Stephanie, Sharon, I don't know if Bria here, Jean Karras. I hope I'm not missing anyone. But thanks for being here. I think this is way too early/late for Bria, who's in France. Thanks to all the members, also to those who've become new members, and then subscribers, and then super chats as well. Thanks very much for that. I think we went, Lisa, I think we went easily 2 hours without a super chat, and I was like, people are hating this. And then suddenly, anyway, I hope you guys found this worthwhile. As you've noticed, we didn't really talk about Depp versus Heard, although we did touch on certain aspects that I think are relevant. but we are trying to look at the bigger picture. And I think it was an interesting conversation. So thanks for joining us, guys. Lisa as well. Has your dog got food?
Yeah, that's the other thing too. Is she's sleeping right now, but I could tell she's not happy with me. So on the next one, I'll introduce everybody to Miss Scarlett.
Yeah, that'll be good. That'll be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Terry says we were listening. Margaret says this was a super chat. That's great. And Choi says I'm making tea. Anyway, thanks very much. We're gonna end right on 3 hours 30 minutes. Lisa, high five.
High five. Nice job.
Okay. All the best. Enjoy your weekend, whatever you're doing.
Thanks. Yeah. You
and
too.
That goes to the rest of you as well. Take care.
Yep.
Okay.
Good night, guys.
Okay. Okay. Ciao.